Chapter 371. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian felt as if his head was filled with lead, extremely heavy. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly sat up. At this moment he was in a pool of magma, and there was a thin blue light around him. It was this blue light that blocked the magma around him. The god on the second floor had made a move. At this moment, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded, "Be careful, this place is not simple." Yi Xian asked, "Where is this?" The god on the second floor said, "There is an unknown existence in the depths of this purple flame pagoda. Be careful." Unknown existence. Yi Xian frowned slightly and was about to speak, but at this moment, there was a sudden tremor not far from him. "Hide," the god on the second floor suddenly said. Hearing this, Yi Xian hurriedly used the chaotic qi to hide himself. Soon Yi Xian saw the two men on fire not far away from him. The two men on fire glanced around and found nothing. Soon the two men on fire turned around and left. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What is that?" The god on the second floor said, "Fire spirit man, a spiritual creature born from magma. It can only survive in magma." Yi Xian glanced into the distance. He thought about it and finally decided not to continue forward. Although he wanted to take a look, his intuition told him that it was very dangerous ahead. It was better not to go. Curiosity killed people. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Go over." It was not the voice of the god on the second floor. It was the voice of the mysterious person on the fourth floor. "Why?" Yi Xian asked. The mysterious person said, "Dao Law." "Dao Law." Yi Xian fell silent. He knew that there were only two ways for those imprisoned in the pagoda to come out. The first was to shatter the seal, and the second was to find the Dao Law and unlock the seal. The mysterious person on the fourth floor had always hoped that he would die. That way she would be able to come out directly if the prison pagoda collapsed. Now she obviously wanted to take the second path. Yi Xian shook his head, "It's dangerous." The mysterious man said indifferently, "If you go, I'll help you condense the second Dao Law sword." Yi Xian said solemnly, "I can look for Guru on the second floor." The mysterious person said, "Although she is at a critical moment right now. She won't ruin her plan for you." Yi Xian was silent. The mysterious man continued, "Other than that, I can also help your master reconstruct his physical body." Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little tempted. "Reconstruct Yu Qi's body?" Meanwhile, the mysterious man continued, "It'll be beneficial to you if you find the Dao Laws. Of course you can forget about it if you're really unwilling." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I don't dare guarantee that I'll definitely be able to obtain the fourth level of the Dao Laws." The mysterious person said, "If you try your best, even if you can't get it now, I will still fulfill the conditions I promised you." Yi Xian nodded. "Alright, I'll try my best." After that, he slowly snuck into the distance. Yi Xian was extremely vigilant towards this unknown place, especially since there were Dao Laws here. According to his past experience, places with Dao Laws weren't good places. As he walked, Yi Xian was suddenly stunned because he noticed that there were numerous violet fire crystals in the magma. These violet fire crystals were huge, and the energy they contained was extremely shocking. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He hurriedly put the violet fire crystals away. Just like that, it didn't take long for him to collect nearly 10,000 violet origin crystals. If they were converted into violet origin crystals, it would be 1 million. Not long after, Yi Xian suddenly stopped because he saw a city in the magma not far away. A city that was situated in the magma. Yi Xian snuck over silently and arrived before the city gate. There were 3 words above the gate, "Skyfire City." Skyfire City? Yi Xian was silent for a while before he entered the city. The city was very deserted, with only occasional flaming figures floating around. Yi Xian cautiously moved forward. Soon he arrived in front of a palace. In front of the palace, there were 2 flaming figures quietly guarding it. The strength of these 2 flaming figures was at the void-piercing realm. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he quietly snuck into the palace. The palace was empty, very spacious. Yi Xian looked not far away and saw a woman sitting there. The woman was about 16 or 17 years old and wore a dress that seemed to be condensed from flames. She sat there quietly with her eyes closed and there was not the slightest bit of aura coming from her. Upon closer inspection, Yi Xian found that the woman was very beautiful. She had curved eyebrows, exquisite facial features and a tall jade nose. The beauty of the woman in front of him did not lose to any woman he had seen before. Yi Xian walked in front of the woman. The woman's hair seemed to be condensed from flames and was very breathtaking. Yi Xian said in a low voice in his heart, the guy on the fourth floor, the Tao Law is on her. The mysterious man on the fourth floor suddenly said. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, it's with her? The mysterious man said, kill her and you can obtain the Tao Law. Kill her? Yi Xian looked at the woman in front of him and frowned. The mysterious man on the fourth floor suddenly said, what are you hesitating for? Yi Xian shook his head, not killing her. What? The mysterious man asked. Yi Xian said indifferently, I have no enmity with her. Why should I kill her? The mysterious man chuckled with a hint of sarcasm in his laughter. What, you want to be a good person now? Yi Xian shook his head, it's not that I want to be a good person. It's just that I have no enmity with her. Why should I kill her? The mysterious woman smiled and said, the weak are prey to the strong. This is the law of this world. Yi Xian nodded, you're right. However, I still can't do it. Yi Xian had never thought of himself as a good person. However, Yi Xian always had his own bottom line. He would never cross that bottom line. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman said, the Tao Law is on her. If you don't kill her, how will you obtain the Tao Law? If you don't obtain the Tao Law, how will you become stronger? If you don't obtain the Tao Law, how will you save your master Yu Qi? Yi Xian fell silent when he heard that. He would be able to obtain the Tao Law if he killed the woman before him. Obtaining the Tao Law meant that he would be able to condense a second Tao Law and reconstruct Yu Qi's body. However, he really couldn't kill her just like that. After a short while, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled, killing a person and obtaining countless benefits. However, I can't feel at ease. I won't do it. As soon as he finished speaking, he took 2 steps back. However, at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from within his body. It was the sword at the center of the pagoda. The sword trembled, and then a ray of light suddenly flashed out from within it and entered Yi Xian's body. As soon as this ray of light entered his body, Yi Xian's body trembled violently. In the next moment, a powerful strand of sword qi instantly spread throughout his entire body. At the same time, the scene before his eyes suddenly changed. At this moment, he was in a boundless gray world. Yi Xian raised his head and looked over. There was a blurry figure standing high in the sky not too far away from him. The figure's back was facing him, so he couldn't see its true appearance clearly. Moreover, there was a similarly blurry little fellow sitting on the figure's shoulder, and the little fellow's head was resting on the figure's head. Yi Xian was just about to speak when a voice suddenly resounded from the horizon. A man must repay kindness and take revenge for enmity. If there's enmity, then so what if I annihilate the entire universe? However, one must never forget one's original intentions and go against one's heart. Since you're able to stick to your heart and gain the acknowledgement of my sword, then that's fate. As he spoke, the figure suddenly waved his right hand lightly, and a ray of light descended from the sky. It didn't take long for the ray of light to enter the space between Yi Xian's brows. In next to no time, strands of information surged into Yi Xian's mind like tide water. At the same time, the voice resounded once more. I learned this sword technique when I was young and it's been with me ever since. However, it's slightly lacking now, so I've improved it slightly. Remember, this sword technique follows one's heart. If one's thoughts go against one's will, then draw the sword and slash the heavens and the earth. If I draw my sword, then even the heavens can slash it. As soon as the voice resounded, the figure gradually became illusory. Below, Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly asked, Senior Yur? At this moment, the figure had completely vanished. At the same time, the scene before Yi Xian's eyes warped, and it didn't take long for him to return to the hall. At this moment, a sword technique had appeared in his mind. At this moment, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor suddenly sighed softly. Did you save this universe in your previous life? Or did you save some peerless almighty? Why do you have such dog-t luck? Yi Xian, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor said again, are you sure you don't want this Tao Law? Yi Xian smiled, and just as he was about to speak, the flaming woman in front of him suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly retreated. In his heart he asked, this fellow actually woke up? The mysterious woman on the fourth floor didn't speak. At this moment, the god on the second floor suddenly said, she's always been awake. Yi Xian's face darkened. Fourth floor, why didn't you tell me? The fourth floor didn't speak. At this moment, Yi Xian knew. This fellow on the fourth floor didn't have good intentions at all. If he really made a move, he would probably be dead by now. And the other party wanted to use the flaming woman in front of him to take his life. This mysterious woman on the fourth floor was really King Evil. Yi Xian and the flaming woman pulled a large distance apart, and the flaming woman just looked at him without saying a word. However, Yi Xian sensed a formless oppressive force. Strong, really strong. This fellow in front of him was definitely not someone he could fight against now. But fortunately, the other party didn't directly make a move. The flaming woman just looked at Yi Xian calmly. Why didn't you listen to her and directly make a move against me? Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly stunned. What the hell? How did this fellow know about my conversation with the mysterious woman on the 4th floor? The other party knew about the prison pagoda? Thinking of this, Yi Xian instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Who the hell was this fellow? The flaming woman stared at Yi Xian. Answer me. Yi Xian forced himself to calm down. He said in a deep voice, as I said earlier, I have no enmity with you and I don't want to kill you. The flaming woman stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly asked in his heart, God on the 2nd floor, how did she know what I said to the bad woman on the 4th floor? After a moment of silence, the god on the 2nd floor said, She should be that Dao Law. There was a solemn tone in his voice. Yi Xian. Chapter 372. Dao Law? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this moment, the flaming lady in front of him suddenly looked at Yi Xian. After a while, she frowned slightly. Yi Xian hesitated for a while and asked softly, What's wrong? The flaming lady said calmly, Logically speaking, this tower will not choose you. Although your talent is not bad, you are not worthy of this tower. Only those who possess the karmic luck of the world can obtain the acknowledgement of this pagoda. At this moment, the mysterious woman on the 4th floor suddenly chuckled and said, Do you think this tower is interested in him? It is just trying to ride on someone's coattails. Yi Xian's face darkened. The coattails this bad woman was talking about must be the woman in the plain dress. The flaming lady looked at Yi Xian's abdomen for a long time. In the end, she frowned slightly and said, This tower's seal should have been broken long ago. Someone strengthened the tower's seal. Was it her? The mysterious woman on the 4th floor said calmly, Who else could it be? The flaming lady glanced at Yi Xian and fell silent. At this moment, the mysterious woman on the 4th floor suddenly said, Yanjia, as the supreme Dao Law of heaven and earth, you have been trapped in this tower with us for nearly 10,000 years. Now, there is a great opportunity to change your fate in front of you. If you do not seize it, you will regret it in the future. The flaming lady said calmly, Kill him? Take over the tower? Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman on the 4th floor said, Of course. This person is so weak, how can he deserve such a treasure? If you kill him, you can get the treasure easily. Yi Xian's face was extremely dark. This woman was not just a normal kind of bad. The flaming lady suddenly chuckled and said, Jian Zizai, you have a good heart. If I kill him, the tower seal will be broken and you can come out, right? Jian Zizai? Yi Xian nodded slightly. So this woman was called Jian Zizai. It should be Jian Vicious. Jian Zizai smiled and said, If you kill him, it will be beneficial for everyone, right? Yanjia said calmly, If I kill him, you will be free. However, I will have to bear this karma. Your plan is very good. Jian Zizai sneered. No matter what, you're the supreme law of heaven and earth, yet you're so timid when doing things. Can't you have some ambition? Yanjia smiled and said, If he really did as you said and attacked me, then I would have killed him. However, he did not make a move. Just as he said, I have no enmity with him, so why should I kill him? Jian Zizai didn't say anything. Actually, from the moment she instigated Yi Xian to kill, she was very clear that if Yi Xian did not make the first move, Yanjia would not make a move against Yi Xian. Because Yi Xian had been acknowledged by the World Prison Pagoda from a certain perspective, he could be said to be the master of these Dao laws within the pagoda. Of course, Yi Xian was relatively weak right now. It was impossible for him to make these Dao laws submit to him. However, these Dao laws would not actively harm him. However, if it was Yi Xian who made the first move, then it would be a different story. What she did not expect was that Yi Xian actually did not make a move. Even in the face of so many temptations, he did not make a move. But now, it was meaningless to say anything. The 4th floor was completely silent. Outside the World Prison Pagoda, Yanjia looked at Yi Xian. My duty was to seal her. However, the pagoda was heavily damaged and the Dao laws were scattered. The seal was broken and I and the other Dao laws were scattered throughout the star field. At this point, she paused and said, I can't return to the pagoda for now. Can't return to the pagoda for now. Yi Xian nodded. It's okay. Whether you return or not is your freedom. As for the Dao laws within the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Xian had never thought that they belonged to him, Yi Xian. Yanjia glanced at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. You must be careful of Jian's eye. This chapter is not over. Please continue. It's simple. Yi Xian nodded. I know. She's very bad. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, why was she imprisoned in the pagoda? Yinjia was silent. Yi Xian softly said, can't you tell me? Yinjia said, she was too strong. Too strong? Yi Xian was startled and then asked, she was imprisoned because she was too strong? Yinjia nodded. Yi Xian hesitated and then said, there's nothing wrong with being too strong. Yinjia shook her head. There's nothing wrong with being too strong. It's those people who were wrong. They wanted to enter the fifth dimension, so they were imprisoned. At this point she paused and then said, it's just that I never expected to encounter those 3 tough people. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, the 3 swords at the top of the pagoda? Yinjia nodded. Yi Xian then asked, were they very strong? Yinjia looked at Yi Xian. Don't ask questions that will make people doubt your intelligence. Yi Xian. At this time, Yinjia suddenly said, even if their strength is heaven-defying and they almost destroyed the pagoda, they can't enter the fifth dimension. What? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Yinjia smiled and did not speak. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yinjia suddenly said, you should go. We'll meet again when we're free. Yi Xian nodded. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly said, Senior, can you help me with a small matter? Yinjia looked at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian said, help my teacher reconstruct a fleshly body. As he spoke, he took out Yu Qi's soul. Yinjia looked at Yu Qi's soul. After a moment of silence, she said, I need some things. You have to get them for me. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what things? Yinjia said, soul, wood, heart, protecting lotus, sculpted spirit flower. These 3 are the main things. Yi Xian nodded. I'll look for them after I leave. Yinjia said, leave her soul here. I'll help her nurture it first. Yi Xian said, okay. Then I'll have to trouble Senior. After speaking, he gave Yu Qi's soul to Yinjia and left the hall. Yinjia looked in the direction Yi Xian had left. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian returned to the purple flame path. He said in a deep voice, Great God from the 2nd floor, why didn't she leave that place? After a moment of silence, the 2nd floor god said, she's using the fire poison in that place to heal. Ill. Yi Xian was slightly startled. She's also injured? Nonsense. The 2nd floor god said, this pagoda was heavily damaged in the past. Who wasn't affected? It's just that some are lighter and some are heavier. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, if these Tao laws return to this pagoda in the future and I'm not very strong, other than death, do you have any other choice? The 2nd floor god suddenly said. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Now he gradually realized that this world prison pagoda was becoming more and more complicated. With such a treasure, if he didn't have comparable strength, he could only wait for death, as the 2nd floor god had said. Strength. He had to have great strength. Brother Yi? At this moment, a voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Yi Xian looked up and saw a man standing not far in front of him. It was the man he had met before. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. It was Ming Kuan. Ming Kuan looked behind Yi Xian and said, has Yi Xian reached the end? Yi Xian thought for a while and smiled, no, but I'm a little tired today. I don't want to leave. I'll leave another day. Ming Kuan's eyes were filled with admiration. Brother Yi's strength is admirable. Admirable. Yi Xian smiled, just so. Ming Kuan shook his head, Brother Yi is too humble. Yi Xian changed the topic. Brother Ming Kuan, do you want to continue or? Ming Kuan hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly, I think this is my limit. So I'll go with Brother Yi. Yi Xian smiled, we're going the same way. Just like that, the two walked together. On the way, Ming Kuan walked very slowly because he had to resist the fire poison. Yi Xian walked very casually because the fire poison didn't dare to approach him. Every time he saw the fire poison leave Yi Xian, Ming Kuan was in awe. Yi Xian spoke abruptly, Brother Ming Kuan, have you joined any organizations? Ming Kuan shook his head, I like to be alone. Yi Xian was delighted in his heart, and he hurriedly said, I've established the virtue school. Brother Ming Kuan, are you interested in joining it? We can chat and discuss the martial Tao together. Ming Kuan was slightly hesitant. Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, even though it's quiet to cultivate alone, it's like building a cart behind closed doors. If we discuss it together, then perhaps we'll obtain unexpected gains. Ming Kuan glanced at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, are you willing to discuss your attainments in the martial Tao with others? Yi Xian smiled, yes. Of course, it's only limited to our own people like friends and brothers. Ming Kuan thought for a moment and said, "All right, I'll join." Yi Xian was overjoyed when he heard this. Ming Kuan's strength was absolutely not inferior to Nan Shan. Because Ming Kuan's ability to rely on his strength to travel so far on the violet flame path was sufficient to explain everything. With the addition of Ming Kuan, the strength of the virtue school would definitely increase greatly. In next to no time, the two of them left the violet flame path, and Xiao Gu and the others were waiting at the exit. Xiao Gu and the others heaved sighs of relief when they saw Yi Xian, and they were stunned when they saw Ming Kuan. Yi Xian led Ming Kuan over to Xiao Gu and the others, and he smiled as he said, "This is brother Ming Kuan. I just got to know him. From now on he's a member of our virtue school." Everyone was stunned once more when they heard this. A member of the virtue school? Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian. "Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course I'm sure." "What?" Xiao Gu hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Brother Yi, do you know who he is?" Yi Xian shook his head. Xiao Gu smiled and said, "He's one of the 4 great monstrous geniuses of the inner court, Ming Kuan." The 4 great monstrous geniuses. Yi Xian smiled. In fact, he had already guessed it. Ming Kuan suddenly said, "What 4 great monstrous geniuses? We dare to call ourselves monstrous geniuses in the inner court, but if we go out, we are nothing." He paused for a moment and then he glanced at Yi Xian. "Of course, brother Yi, you can be called a monstrous genius wherever you go." Yi Xian said, "Brother Ming Kuan, do you mean that there are more monstrous geniuses than the inner court out there?" Ming Kuan smiled bitterly. "Many? The never-ending starfield is divided into the southern region, the northern region, and the heaven region. Our Dao Yi Academy belongs to the northern region. The true geniuses of the never-ending starfield are in the heaven region. Even the southern region is much more powerful than here." Then he looked out of the violet flame tower and said softly, "If you can't leave a word on the Dao pillar of the heaven region, how can you call yourself a monstrous genius? P.S. Everyone can leave a comment to see how many fans you have." End of this chapter. Chapter 373. Dao Pillar? Hearing this, everyone looked at Ming Kuan. Ming Kuan nodded. In the distant heaven region there is a Dao Pillar. No one knows the origin of this Dao Pillar, but they know that it contains a supreme Dao. Only those who can leave their names on it are truly monstrous. He glanced at the crowd and smiled bitterly. Until now, only 3 people from the northern region have managed to leave their names on it. One of them is the founder of the Dao Yi Academy, Dean Mu. Mu Daoyi. Everyone's expression turned solemn. To them Mu Daoyi was a legend. Ming Kuan continued, "Our Dao Yi Academy is not bad in the northern region, but in the southern region and the heaven region." At this point he didn't continue. Everyone understood what he meant. At this time Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Why should we belittle ourselves? If others are stronger than us, that's a good thing. It proves that we still have room to grow and we have a goal to pursue." Then he patted Ming Kuan's shoulder and said with a smile, "Believe in yourself. We won't be worse than others." Ming Kuan thought about it and nodded. "Brother Yi is right. We have to correct our attitude." Yi Xian laughed and said, "All of you cultivate well here. I have to go take care of something." With that he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Ming Kuan suddenly looked at Xiao Gu. "Did brother Yi just enter the inner court?" Xiao Gu nodded. "Just entered." Ming Kuan said softly, "Yi Xian's strength is truly unfathomable." Xiao Gu. After leaving the Dao Yi Institute, Yi Xian went to Dao Yi City and found a chamber of commerce. Taiha Merchant Association. After Yi Xian entered the chamber of commerce, a delicate and pretty woman came to greet him. She glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "What do you need?" Yi Xian said, "I need 3 things: divine soul wood, heart protecting lotus, spirit sculpting flower. Do you have it?" The pretty woman looked at Yi Xian and said, "Sir, these aren't ordinary things." Yi Xian laughed. "Are you afraid that I can't afford it?" The pretty woman hurriedly said, "That's not what I mean, it's just that." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Can you make the decision? If you can't make the decision, then let someone who can make the decision talk to me." The pretty woman bowed slightly. "Then please wait a moment." With that she turned around and left. Not long after, an old man walked out. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and asked, "What 3 items do you want?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled and said, "Those 3 items are all extraordinary items, especially the heart-protecting lotus. It is incomparably precious and is worth at least 100,000 purple Genesis crystals." 100,000. Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart relaxed. 100,000 purple Genesis crystals was naturally a piece of cake for him. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Then please bring those 3 items over." The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "It seems that you aren't an ordinary person. May I know who you are?" Yi Xian was a little impatient. "I'm just an independent cultivator. Sir, I urgently need those 3 items." The old man smiled and said, "Esteemed guest, my Chamber of Commerce does not have these 3 items." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression instantly turned cold. "What the hell are you talking about if you don't have them?" The old man continued, "Esteemed guest, please don't misunderstand. The old man means that we don't have them here. However, we can transfer the goods. It will take a day." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Then transfer the goods as soon as possible." The old man smiled and said, "You need to pay first. 200,000 purple Genesis crystals as a deposit. If you suddenly don't want it, we won't refund the money." "A deposit?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring flew over to the old man. There were exactly 200,000 purple Genesis crystals within the spatial ring. The old man grinned as he put the spatial ring away, and then he said, "Please come here at the same time tomorrow." Yi Xian cupped his fists and said, "Then I'll be troubling you." He turned around and left once he finished speaking. Yi Xian returned to Dao Yi Academy after he left the Grand Harmony Merchant Group. Yi Xian entered the World Prison Pagoda in his wooden house. A sword technique. Now he could finally calm down and study the sword technique that the figure in the gray world had given him. The sword technique didn't have a name, but he could sense that it was very powerful. Yi Xian started to study it, and it didn't take long for him to notice a special characteristic of the sword technique. The most special characteristic of the sword technique was its explosive force. The explosive force at the instant the sword was drawn. This sword technique was different from the life and death sword technique. The might of the life and death sword technique was related to faith and confidence, while this sword technique was purely related to strength and speed. The two were completely different. With this thought in mind, an idea suddenly popped into Yi Xian's mind. Could he fuse these 2 different sword techniques into one? Fuse. Yi Xian was a little excited because he realized that it was completely possible. Yi Xian didn't just think about it but immediately tried it. However, as soon as he tried it, he ran into a problem. The scabbard. He found that a normal scabbard couldn't withstand these 2 sword techniques. No, just the sword technique of drawing the sword wasn't something a normal scabbard could withstand. He needed to find a suitable scabbard. Without a scabbard, Yi Xian could only temporarily give up on fusing the 2 sword techniques. What he could do now was to study and thoroughly comprehend this sword technique. Time slowly passed. On the 2nd day, Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda and once again arrived at the Grand Harmony Merchant Group in Daoyi City. The person who welcomed him was still the delicate and pretty woman from yesterday. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Please inform your merchant group's manager that I'm here to collect something." The delicate and pretty woman nodded, "Please wait." Then she turned and left. Not long after, the delicate and pretty woman walked out. She walked up to Yi Xian and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Manager Su isn't here." Yi Xian frowned. "He told me to come here today to collect something. Why isn't he here?" The delicate and pretty woman shook her head. "I don't know, please come back tomorrow." Then she turned and left. Seeing this, Yi Xian's frown deepened, and he fell silent for a moment before he turned and left. The next day, Yi Xian came to the Grand Harmony Merchant Group again and saw the delicate and pretty woman again. He was just about to speak when the delicate and pretty woman said, "Manager Su isn't here, please come back another day." Then she turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly stood in front of the delicate and pretty woman, and the delicate and pretty woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian smiled. "He doesn't want to see me, right?" The delicate and pretty woman replied, "Manager Su isn't here." Yi Xian suddenly slammed his right hand. Boom. Not far away, the wall collapsed and an old man appeared there. Was Manager Su. Yi Xian pointed at Steward Su, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Didn't you say he wasn't here?" The delicate and pretty woman looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. At this time, Manager Su walked in front of Yi Xian, his expression calm. "What, are you going to use force here?" Yi Xian smiled. "I wouldn't dare, I'm just here to collect something I need. Give it to me, I'll leave immediately." "Something?" Manager Su was expressionless. "What is it? The old man doesn't know." Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly happy. He smiled. "This Grand Harmony Merchant Group is actually a black shop." Manager Su narrowed his eyes, a cold light flashing in his eyes. "Sir, you can't say such things." As his voice fell, 6 people suddenly appeared behind him, all of them void-piercing realm experts. Manager Su looked coldly at Yi Xian. This wall is worth 100,000 purple origin crystals. Leave 100,000 purple origin crystals and I'll let you live. 100,000 purple origin crystals. Yi Xian thought for a moment. He smiled. Are you sure you want it? Manager Su said indifferently, why not? Yi Xian pointed his finger and a storage ring flew in front of Steward Su. Steward Su glanced at the storage ring. There were exactly 100,000 purple origin crystals in it. Manager Su put away the storage ring and looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian smiled, turned around and left. Manager Su and the others did not stop him. At this time, the delicate and pretty woman suddenly said, why don't you kill him and get rid of future troubles? Manager Su said indifferently, why kill him? He's just a true defensive realm, let him come for revenge. If he doesn't come for revenge, how can I earn more? With that he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left Tai-He Merchant Association, he immediately returned to Dao-Yi Academy. Inside the Violet Flame Tower, Yi Xian found Xiao Gu and the others. What? Brother Yi, you were extorted 10 million purple origin crystals by Tai-He Merchant Association? Holy shit, 10 million purple origin crystals? Is Tai-He Merchant Association crazy? How dare they extort our Dao-Yi Academy? Let's go tell the Grand Elder. With that, everyone was about to find the Grand Elder. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, why find the Grand Elder? We'll settle this ourselves. Come, brothers, follow me to Tai-He Merchant Association. With that he turned around and left. Xiao Gu and the others hurriedly followed. On the way Xiao Gu said in a deep voice, Brother Yi, this Tai-He Merchant Association is not simple. It is the largest merchant association in our northern region, with astonishing financial resources and vast connections. We have to be careful. Yi Xian nodded and said with a smile, be careful, everyone be careful. This time we're here to reason things out. Hearing this, Xiao Ji's expression relaxed slightly. Reason meant that the matter would not be blown out of proportion. Soon Yi Xian brought 12 inner courtyard students to Tai-He Merchant Association. The sudden arrival of so many experts naturally alarmed Tai-He Merchant Association. Soon, several void-piercing realm experts blocked in front of Yi Xian and the others. The one leading them was Steward Su from before. Seeing Yi Xian, Steward Su was slightly taken aback. Then he glanced at the people beside Yi Xian, and his expression quickly turned solemn. Because the people who came were all void-piercing realm experts, of course, except for Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian, Xiao Gu looked at Steward Su. Brother Yi, is he the one who extorted 10 million purple origin crystals from you? Yi Xian nodded, his face full of grief and indignation. It's him, he extorted 10 million purple origin crystals from me. Hearing this, Steward Su was stunned, then he flew into a rage. What nonsense are you talking about? At this moment Yi Xian, who was in front of him, suddenly disappeared. The next second, a sword pierced his throat. Blood splattered. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Xiao Gu looked at Yi Xian, his face full of shock. Big brother, didn't you say you were reasonable? Yi Xian said indifferently, this is my way of reasoning. Xiao Gu. Chapter 374. In the field, everyone was struck dumb after Yi Xian had made his move. Obviously they did not expect Yi Xian to suddenly attack. Steward Su, who was still breathing, was also staring at Yi Xian. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. He did not expect Yi Xian to attack him. Moreover, he did not even have the strength to fight back. At this moment, a group of experts suddenly appeared in the surroundings. They were all from the Tai-He Trade Association. At the same time, a black-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others. The black-robed old man glanced at Yi Xian and the others, frowning slightly. Are you from the Dao-Yi Academy? Yi Xian nodded. Yes, we are from the Dao-Yi Academy. The black-robed old man stared at Yi Xian. Why did you kill people from my Tai-He Trade Association? Yi Xian sneered. Senior, you should ask him that. The black-robed old man's expression gradually turned cold. You want me to ask a dead person? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Sorry, I forgot about this. It's like this. 2 days ago, I came to your trade association to buy a batch of things. Steward Su asked me to pay 200,000 purple origin crystals as a deposit, which I did. However, when I came today, not only did he not give me what I wanted, he even starved me of 10 million purple origin crystals. 10 million purple origin crystals. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the black-robed old man's eyelids twitched. 10 million purple origin crystals? Are you sure? Yi Xian sternly said, Of course I'm sure. Senior, I have no other request. As long as your trade association compensates me with 10 million purple origin crystals, I will naturally leave. Compensate 10 million purple origin crystals. The black-robed old man laughed in anger. Interesting. To think that someone would come to extort my Taihe Trade Association today. Interesting. Yi Xian said indifferently, Taihe Trade Association does not intend to compensate? The black-robed old man sneered. Do you think my Taihe Trade Association is so easy to bully? Right at this moment, Yi Xian said abruptly, seize everything in the Imperial Harmony Trading Company. Leave nothing behind. As his voice faded, he suddenly drew his sword and charged toward the black-robed elder. Seeing this scene, Xiao Gu and the others were stunned. Robbing Taihe Merchant Association? By the time everyone regained their senses, Yi Xian had already started fighting with the black-robed old man. Xiao Gu and the others looked at each other. Soon, Xiao Ji's expression became somewhat sinister. Taihe Chamber of Commerce is bullying our Dao Yi Academy. Beat them up. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone rushed over. In the Dao Yi Academy, inside the Dao Yi Hall, the first elder suddenly sat up and looked at an old man in front of him in disbelief. What did you say? He brought inner courtyard disciples to rob Taihe Merchant Association. The old man nodded. Yes, they have already started fighting with the Taihe Chamber of Commerce. The matter is very big and many people in the city are already paying attention. The first elder said in a deep voice, why did he rob Taihe Merchant Association? The old man said, it is said that he went to Taihe Merchant Association to buy a few things, and a steward of Taihe Merchant Association embezzled his money? This should be true, but it is absolutely not 10 million purple source crystals. This guy must have deliberately blackmailed Taihe Merchant Association. Speaking of this, he shook his head with a wry smile. This guy is really bold. The first elder said indifferently, not only is he bold, but he is also cunning. The old man looked at the first elder. What do you mean? The first elder chuckled. This was originally his own matter, but now he has forcibly turned it into a matter between Taihe Merchant Association and our Dao Yi Academy. Saying that, he got up. Let's go and have a look. Taihe Merchant Association. Yi Xian and the others have already started fighting with Taihe Merchant Association. As soon as the battle began, Taihe Merchant Association's side was completely annihilated. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Under Yi Xian's order, Xiao Gu and the others also frantically looted the Taihe Merchant Association's things. At first, Xiao Gu and the others were a little hesitant, but soon they became even crazier than Yi Xian. Taihe Merchant Association is the best merchant association in Daoyi City. How could the things inside be ordinary? The black-robed old man who was fighting with Yi Xian was shocked and angry. He was shocked because he did not expect Yi Xian, who was only at the true imperial law realm, to be so terrifying, and angry because more than half of the Taihe Merchant Association's things had been looted by Xiao Gu and the others. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the battlefield, "Stop!" As the voice fell, a powerful force suddenly enveloped Yi Xian and the others. Everyone stopped. Yi Xian looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing quietly in the air, and the middle-aged man was looking at him. The middle-aged man looked down at Yi Xian. Did the Dao Yi Academy give you the courage? As the voice fell, an invisible pressure suddenly fell from the sky, pressing down on Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to act, but an old man suddenly appeared in front of him. It was the first elder. The first elder gently waved his right hand, and the invisible pressure disappeared directly. The first elder appeared in front of the middle-aged man, smiled and said, "Brother Song Lian, I trust you have been well since we last met." The middle-aged man called Song Lian looked coldly at the first elder. "First elder, your Dao Yi Academy openly robbed my Taihe Merchant Association. How do you explain that?" The first elder shook his head and smiled. "Brother Song Lian, this matter is your Taihe Merchant Association's fault. My student came to buy things from your Taihe Merchant Association, but your steward wanted to take advantage of him and even blackmailed him. This matter, your Taihe Merchant Association did not act in the right way." Song Lian frowned slightly and turned to look at the black-robed old man below. The black-robed old man said in a deep voice, "I don't know the specific situation." As he spoke, he turned to look at the delicate woman not far away. "What exactly is the situation?" The delicate woman was somewhat hesitant. Seeing this, the black-robed old man's face immediately sank. At this moment, the first elder suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Song Lian, the matter is very clear, isn't it?" Hearing this, the delicate woman below hurriedly said, "No, although Steward Su took 200,000 purple Genesis crystals from him, he did not blackmail him for 10 million purple Genesis crystals." As soon as these words came out, Song Lian's face suddenly turned ugly, and the surrounding people booed. Cheating. Taihe Merchant Association really cheated. Song Lian suddenly waved his right hand, and the delicate woman directly turned into a pile of minced meat. Song Lian threw a cold look at Yi Xian below. In the end he looked at the Grand Elder. Congratulations to your institute for getting such an excellent student. With that he turned and left. Below, Yi Xian hurriedly said, My 10 million purple Genesis crystals. The first elder appeared in front of Yi Xian and glanced at Yi Xian. Know when to stop. Yi Xian said indifferently, They blackmailed me, how can I let this matter go? The corners of the first elder's mouth twitched. You've already robbed more than half of their chamber of commerce, you've made a profit. A profit? Yi Xian thought about it and agreed. At this moment, the first elder suddenly said, Yi Xian, what you did is equivalent to offending the Taihe Merchant Association. Do you know that? Yi Xian smiled. First elder, I am not a troublemaker, but the Taihe Merchant Association has bullied me, I can't tolerate it. The first elder glanced at Yi Xian, shook his head and sighed. In the future, if there is nothing important, try not to leave the academy. The Taihang Merchant Association has suffered such a big loss this time, they will not let this matter rest. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. The first elder nodded. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Then he turned and left. Yi Xian took Xiaogu and the others back to the Dao Yi Academy. Inside Yi Xian's wooden house, everyone gathered around the table, dividing the spoils. Xiaogu smiled. This time, we obtained a total of 6 million purple origin crystals, including 49 heaven-grade treasures and various heaven and earth treasures. I estimate that they are worth about 2 million purple origin crystals. A total of 8 million. Yi Xian smiled. Xiaogu, you divide it, everyone has a share. Xiaogu grinned, then began to divide the spoils. He first gave it to Yi Xian, but Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean by this? He obtained 3 million purple origin crystals. Xiaogu smiled. Brother Yi, the reason why we obtained so much this time is all because of you. You contributed the most, so naturally you should obtain it. We have no objections. Everyone nodded, indicating that they had no objections. Yi Xian shook his head. If it weren't for the brothers, I wouldn't have been able to suppress the Taihe Chamber of Commerce. Everyone has contributed, so let's divide it equally. Xiaogu still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian sternly said, If I said to divide it equally, then so be it, do it. Seeing that Yi Xian was so determined, Xiaogu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Soon everyone divided the wealth. Inside the bamboo house, everyone had a bright smile on their faces. With this wealth, it could be said that they would not lack purple origin crystals for a short period of time. And this time Yi Xian's position in everyone's hearts also changed a little. After everyone left, Yi Xian came to the divine weapon courtyard of the Dao Yi Academy. There were many rare treasures stored inside. His purpose this time was to see if there was a suitable scabbard for him. But just as he arrived at the entrance of the divine weapon courtyard, he was stopped by an old man. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Do you have an entry token? Yi Xian was stunned. Entry token? What entry token? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. If not, what are you doing here? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, Who do I find for this entry token? The old man said lightly, Go find the Grand Elder. Yi Xian smiled. Okay, I'll go find the Grand Elder. After saying that, he turned and ran. Old man, Dao Yi Hall. Yi Xian found the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian in front of him. You want to go to the divine weapon courtyard? Yi Xian nodded. The Grand Elder asked, What for? Yi Xian said, To find something. The Grand Elder's eyes twitched. What do you think the divine weapon courtyard is? You think you can go there whenever you want? Yi Xian said with a smile, I understand there must be some conditions to enter. Grand Elder, why don't you tell me about it? The Grand Elder said lightly, There are no harsh conditions. You can enter as long as you have performed a meritorious deed for the academy. Meritorious deed. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, I have performed a meritorious deed for the academy. The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian, a little surprised. When have you performed a meritorious deed for the academy? Yi Xian said seriously, Grand Elder, what do you think of me, Yi Xian? The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian, then said, Not bad talent, not bad strength, and outstanding combat ability rare. Yi Xian said seriously, Grand Elder, I am not narcissistic, but a genius like me joining the Dao Yi Academy is in itself a meritorious deed for the academy. And a meritorious deed. The Grand Elder was dumbfounded. End of this chapter. Chapter 375. The first elder stared at Yi Xian. He didn't expect that someone in this world could be so shameless. So shameless that he was speechless. After a while, the first elder shook his head and smiled. What do you need? Yi Xian said quickly, a scabbard. A scabbard? The first elder thought for a while and said, that's not difficult. You don't need to enter the institute. I'll give you a scabbard. Yi Xian shook his head. First elder, the scabbard I need isn't an ordinary scabbard. I need a very good scabbard. How good is it? The first elder asked. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, Saint rank. His intuition told him that if it wasn't a Saint rank scabbard, it wouldn't be able to bear those two sword skills. It must be a Saint rank scabbard. The first elder was stunned by Yi Xian's words and shook his head. No. The old man can tell you for sure that the institute doesn't have a Saint rank scabbard. He paused for a while and said, the Immortal Sword Sect might have one, but they won't give it to you. The Immortal Sword Sect. Yi Xian fell silent. The first elder suddenly said, besides the Immortal Sword Sect, there's another place you can go. Yi Xian asked quickly, where? The first elder said, the blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith's shop? Yi Xian was puzzled, where? The first elder said with a smile, in Daoyi City. There's a blacksmith there, a very powerful one. He might be able to customize a scabbard for you. However, whether or not he will do it for you will depend on your own ability. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, I'll give it a try. The first elder smiled, good luck. Yi Xian said again, first elder, I want to ask you for a favor. The first elder said, speak. Yi Xian said, I need 3 items. The great elder said, the 3 items you bought from Taihe Merchant Association? Yi Xian nodded. The great elder nodded slightly. I'll do it for you, but you'll have to pay for it yourself. Yi Xian smiled and said, of course. Then I'll visit great elder another day. With that, he bowed slightly before turning around and leaving. Seeing Yi Xian leave, the great elder shook his head and lightly laughed. Actually, his personality isn't that bad. In the beginning he had indeed coveted Yi Xian's treasure. But in the end he gradually changed his mind. Just as the mysterious black-clothed man had said, the treasure on Yi Xian's body would bring bad luck to whoever took it. Instead of seizing this hot potato by force, it was better to form a good relationship with Yi Xian and wait for the future. Moreover, he realized that Yi Xian was a person who was easy to get along with. Of course, he was also a bit irascible, but this irascibility in his view was actually a kind of personality. After Yi Xian left Daoyi Palace Hall, he came to Daoyi City. Soon he found the blacksmith shop that the great elder had mentioned. The blacksmith shop was not big, it should be said to be very small, and it was a bit shabby. In front of the blacksmith shop, there was some messy scrap iron. At first glance, it looked very desolate. Yi Xian walked to the door and knocked. At this time, a voice suddenly came from inside. Scram. Yi Xian. Naturally, Yi Xian would not give up so easily. He knocked on the door again. At this time, a powerful force shook out from inside. Yi Xian's face changed, and his right arm moved forward to block. Bang. Yi Xian retreated again and again. This time he directly retreated dozens of feet. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked at his right arm. His entire right arm had cracked. His expression gradually became serious. Soon Yi Xian walked up to the door and knocked on it once more. Boom. Yi Xian was sent flying again. Just like this continued for about half an hour, and the door opened. An old man in tattered clothes walked out. He pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Are you out of your mind? Is there something wrong with you? Is there no end to this? As he spoke, he suddenly stopped. Because Yi Xian, who was not far away, turned around and ran. He did not even see a shadow. The old man was stunned. After a moment, the old man cursed angrily. What the hell? After saying that, he turned around and returned to his room. The next day, Yi Xian came to the blacksmith shop again and knocked on the door again. An hour later, the blacksmith shop's door was suddenly opened, and an afterimage shot out. In the distance, Yi Xian turned around and ran. The old man who rushed out had an ugly expression on his face. On the third day, just as Yi Xian knocked on the door, a powerful force suddenly blasted out from the door. Yi Xian turned around and ran. This time the old man chose to give chase. He sensed the old man chasing after him. Yi Xian hurriedly quickened his pace. Not only that, but he also used the chaotic energy to conceal himself. Thus, very quickly the old man lost track of him. Somewhere outside the city, the old man looked around coldly. At this moment, there was no longer any trace of Yi Xian's aura. A moment later, he turned around and left. On the 4th day, Yi Xian came to the smithy again. Just like that, on the 7th day, Yi Xian knocked on the door and turned around to run. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "Bastard, what do you want?" Yi Xian stopped and turned around. He saw the old man coldly staring at him at the blacksmith shop's door. Yi Xian grinned. "Greetings, senior. This junior is Yi Xian from Dao Yi Academy." The old man looked coldly at Yi Xian. "What do you want?" Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, this junior wants to ask you to forge a scabbard for me. Hurry up and get lost." The old man waved his hand impatiently. "The old man will not forge anything for anyone. Scram." After saying that, he turned around and walked into the house. Outside the house, Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then turned around and left. The next day Yi Xian came to the smithy again and knocked on the door. When the door opened and saw Yi Xian, the old man frowned. "Are you done?" Yi Xian said. "I want to learn blacksmithing." Blacksmithing. He thought of something. He needed huge swords, and if he were to buy all of them he would not be able to afford it even with his wealth. Why not forge them himself? Learn blacksmithing. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the old man was slightly stunned. "You want to learn blacksmithing?" Yi Xian immediately said. "Yes, I want to learn blacksmithing." The old man sneered. "What does it have to do with this old man? Go learn it with someone else. This old man has no time for you." Yi Xian said indifferently. "If you don't accept me, I will not give up." Hearing this, the old man flew into a rage. "Are you threatening me?" Yi Xian hurriedly said. No. Senior, to be honest, don't be so quick to refuse me. Look at me. I'm not bad." The old man glared at Yi Xian. "Why is your skin so thick?" Yi Xian said seriously. "Senior, I'm serious. You definitely won't be disappointed if you let me try." The old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time and then he said, "You aren't just being thick-skinned. You've reached a state of shamelessness." Yi Xian was speechless. The old man sized up Yi Xian. "Who asked you to come here?" Yi Xian said, "The Grand Elder." The old man frowned. "The Grand Elder of Dao Yi Academy?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The old man fell silent for a short while before he said, "The old man doesn't accept disciples, nor does he forge anything for others." Don't bother the old man. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and was about to enter the room. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior." The old man stopped and turned around to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, do you have anyone to recommend?" "Right, I don't recommend just anyone. I need a scabbard, an extremely good one. Only then will it be able to endure my sword techniques." The old man sized up Yi Xian. "You need a scabbard? Not a sword?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man spoke indifferently. "You're quite arrogant. Tell me, what level of scabbard do you need?" Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "The saint rank." The old man sneered. "It's just a saint rank? Go, don't bother the old man." After that he turned around and left. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, "What do you mean by a saint rank? Old man, do you know what a saint rank is?" "Do you?" The old man's eyes twitched. The old man doesn't know what a saint rank is? As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and an arm-long iron hammer suddenly flew to Yi Xian from a corner not far away. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the iron hammer because it was a saint rank. It really is a saint rank. Yi Xian's expression became solemn. "Who is this old man?" The old man sneered. "Do you have a saint rank?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "Old man, I'm not bragging, but if I take something out, it will definitely scare the crap out of you." A wisp of ridicule appeared on the corners of the old man's mouth. "You want to scare me out of my wits? What a big tone you have. What treasure has the old man not seen in his life?" Yi Xian said lightly, "Old man, since it's like this, let's make a bet. If the item I take out can amaze you, you'll forge a scabbard for me. If not, I'll leave and never bother you again. How about it?" The old man coldly looked at Yi Xian. "In the end, it's still a scabbard. You're not only thick-skinned but also cunning. A swordsman like you is hard to come by in 1,000 years." Yi Xian was expressionless. "Just tell me if you want to bet or not." The old man sneered. "Bet, of course I want to bet. The old man wants to see what treasure you have that can amaze the old man. However, I'll say this in advance, if you can't amaze the old man, you'll leave and never come back." Yi Xian nodded. "Remember, if I amaze you, you'll forge a scabbard no lower than the saint level." The old man said lightly, "Fine. Now take out your treasure." Yi Xian looked around and said, "It's not convenient here. Come with me." Then he turned and left. The old man frowned, but he still followed. Soon Yi Xian led the old man to a mountain range outside Daoyi City. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the old man. The old man said lightly, "Take it out." Yi Xian smiled. He opened his right hand, and a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. The sword at the top of the pagoda. When the sword appeared in front of him, heaven and earth changed color in an instant. The old man was stunned. Chapter 376. At this moment, the old man's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with disbelief. It didn't take long for him to walk swiftly towards the sword. Meanwhile, Yi Xian sheathed the sword. The surroundings instantly returned to calm. The old man walked over to Yi Xian, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Senior, based on your expression, it should have shocked you." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What is that?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "My sword." The old man fell silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. "This sword isn't a peerless weapon, but its owner is extremely strong and he gave it new life. To put it simply, the sword is very ordinary but the owner is extraordinary. Therefore the sword is extraordinary as well." When he spoke up to this point, he looked at Yi Xian. "You're just a sword immortal, and you don't have the ability to give a sword new life." Yi Xian fell silent. This old man really isn't simple. Meanwhile, the old man said, "All right," the old man said it. "I never expected that I would encounter such a divine object here." Yi Xian grinned when he heard this. "Senior, when will you forge a scabbard for me?" The old man fell silent. Yi Xian's face sank. This old man wouldn't go back on his word, right? As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the old man sneered. "Don't worry, the old man won't go back on his word." Yi Xian chuckled. "How could a figure like Senior possibly go back on his word? I have complete confidence in Senior." The old man said indifferently, "Come with me." As he spoke, Yi Xian followed the old man back to the smithy. After they entered the smithy, a cold and musty smell instantly assaulted their faces, and it was extremely unpleasant. The old man walked over to the side and lay down on a bamboo couch. He said indifferently, "Let me see your sword. I need to make one for you." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he withdrew the saint-rank dark sword. The elder waved his right hand, and the dark blue sword flew into his grasp. He glanced at the sword in his hand. Pseudo-saint tier. Pseudo-saint level? Yi Xian was stunned. "What do you mean?" The old man said coldly, "It means that your sword is trash. Do you understand?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Senior, is this sword trash?" The old man sneered, "The craftsmanship of this sword is passable, but the materials used are trash. If it wasn't for the sword spirit being a bit special, this sword wouldn't even be considered a pseudo-saint grade sword." As he spoke, he threw the sword in front of Yi Xian. "This sword won't do. Change to another one." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "No more." Speaking up to here, he seemed to have thought of something and chuckled, "Senior, why don't you forge a sword for me directly? It would be perfect to forge a sword and a scabbard together." "Dream on." The old man glared at Yi Xian. "This old man will only make a scabbard for you." Yi Xian was slightly helpless. "A scabbard it is." As he spoke, he waved the sword in his hand. "This is my best sword, so I'll make a scabbard for it." The old man spoke indifferently. "Are you sure? After all, you only have this chance. If you have a good sword, then you'll have an even better scabbard." Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "Senior, I want to, but I don't have any other swords. I'll just make do with it for now." The old man glanced at Yi Xian. "What about the one from before?" Yi Xian shrugged. "It's too formidable. I can't take it for now." The old man fell silent for a short moment before he said, "If you're willing, then you can lend that sword to me and I'll forge a replica for you. How about it?" Yi Xian was stunned. "A replica? What do you mean?" The old man spoke in a low voice. "I'll forge a replica, one that you can use. How about it?" Yi Xian fell silent. The old man spoke indifferently. "It's fine if you're worried." Yi Xian shook his head. "There's nothing to be worried about. But Senior, I'm unable to control this sword. So, it would cause a huge commotion if I let it out." The old man fell silent for a short moment before he said, "Come with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and walked towards the exit. Yi Xian hurriedly followed the old man. Yi Xian followed the old man to an underground entrance, and then he followed the old man all the way down. Just like that, they walked for almost 4 hours. When they walked out of an exit, the scene before his eyes suddenly opened up, and there was an abandoned ruin 300 m away from him. The old man led Yi Xian to the ruins, and it wasn't long before the old man stopped. There was an enormous furnace before him, and there was lava within it. Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. "What's this?" The old man spoke indifferently. "This iron furnace is connected to the center of the earth, and it contains an extremely large amount of the energy of the earth veins and lava. As he spoke, he turned to look at Yi Xian. Sword. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the sword at the top of the tower instantly appeared in front of him. At the instant that sword appeared, the ground around him started trembling. The old man's expression instantly turned solemn when he witnessed this scene. The might of this sword far surpasses this world. How formidable was its owner? As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Kid, your background isn't simple at all. Yi Xian laughed embarrassedly. No, I don't have any backing. Really? The old man laughed coldly. Don't worry. The old man has no intentions towards you. As he spoke, he waved his right hand. In an instant, an invisible force appeared in the surroundings, and Yi Xian sensed that the space around him seemed to have been strengthened at that moment. The old man ignored Yi Xian. He waved his right hand again and a large pile of items appeared on his right. These items were strangely shaped, and one could tell at a glance that they weren't ordinary items. Very soon Yi Xian seemed to have noticed something and he hurriedly asked, Senior, are these materials for forging swords? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Of course. I told you to prepare the materials. Do you have them? Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly overjoyed. He suddenly realized that this old man was actually quite nice. The old man ignored Yi Xian and turned to look at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes as he looked at the sword. Yi Xian was quite excited as well. He couldn't utilize the sword at the top of the pagoda for now, and it was something that he'd always felt regretful about. On the other hand, if he had a replica, then it would definitely be a good thing for him, because it could allow him to make a transition. The old man suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. Put the sword away. I'll use it when I need it. Yi Xian did as he was told and put the sword away. On the other hand, the old man raised his right hand lightly, and it didn't take long for all the treasures on his right to fly up into the air. After that, they flew into the iron furnace one by one. At the same time, he withdrew a command token, and it didn't take long for the enormous iron furnace to start trembling. At the same time, the lava within the iron furnace started to tremble, and it didn't take long for countless strands of mysterious energy to converge within the iron furnace. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, Stand guard. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped up into the iron furnace. Outside the iron furnace, Yi Xian rubbed his hands together with slight excitement. The sword forged by this old man is definitely at the saint rank at the very least. Moreover, there's even a sheath. At that time he would be able to combine both sword techniques, and his overall strength would improve by more than just a little. Wait. All he could do now was wait. Just like that, day after day passed. On the third day, there was still no movement from within the iron furnace. Yi Xian had wanted to go in and take a look on many occasions, but he didn't in the end. Because he knew that if he was interrupted at the critical moment, then it was very likely that all his efforts would be wasted. So he continued waiting. Just like that, on the fifth day the iron furnace started to tremble slightly, and Yi Xian hurriedly stood up. Is it about to be done? At this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned around. Not far in front of him, a young man and an old man were walking towards him. The young man and the old man were slightly stunned when they saw Yi Xian. The young man sized up Yi Xian and frowned. Who are you? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Who are you? The young man's frown deepened. I'm asking you a question. Yi Xian replied calmly. I'm a student of the inner court of Dao Yi Academy. Dao Yi Academy? The young man turned to look at the old man and the old man replied calmly. It's an academy in the northern region. When Mu Daoyi was still around it was not bad, but now, it's not good enough. Hearing this, the young man looked at Yi Xian. Why are you here? Yi Xian smiled. To run some errands. The young man looked straight at Yi Xian. Now get lost. I won't repeat myself. Chapter 377. Yi Xian remained silent. The other party did not even give face to the Dao Yi Academy. Clearly the other party had a powerful background. Since the Dao Yi Academy's reputation was useless, he had to make his move. He chose to make the first move. Yi Xian suddenly wielded his sword. This sword attack was very fast and there was no sign at all. Before the young man could react, Yi Xian's sword was already at his forehead. The old man had appeared on Yi Xian's left side. His left hand was about 10 inches away from Yi Xian's shoulder, but he did not dare to touch it. Yi Xian's sudden attack caught the old man and the young man by surprise. Of course, they were too confident and underestimated Yi Xian. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Let him go. Yi Xian smiled. I mean no harm. I just don't want you to disturb a senior of mine. That's all. The old man stared at Yi Xian calmly, but his eyes were filled with murderous intent. On the count of 3, if you don't let him go, the old man. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pushed his right hand forward lightly. The sword pierced half an inch into the young man's forehead, and blood spurted out. Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. He said with a smile, "Count them." "Why don't you count?" "I'm listening." The old man looked at Yi Xian for a while, then said, "You will pay for this." Yi Xian raised his sword again, this time deeper into the young man's forehead. The young man's body trembled. If it had gone any deeper, he would have died. At this moment, the old man's voice became completely silent. Yi Xian looked at the old man and smiled. "Come on, continue." The old man stared at Yi Xian and said nothing. The young man in front of Yi Xian looked ferocious. "Do you know who I am?" Yi Xian turned to look at the young man. "Then do you know who I am?" The young man sneered. "Is that so? I want to know who you are." Yi Xian grinned. "Actually, I'm your father." The young man flared up with rage. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke angrily, "Shut the fuck up. One more word and I'll chop you up." The young man wanted to say something, but the old man not far away shook his head slightly, signaling him not to say anything. The young man said in a low voice, "Uncle Yunxiao, I don't believe he dares to kill me." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Do you want to try?" The young man was just about to speak when the old man called Yunxiao spoke abruptly. "Young man, speak. What exactly do you want?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Nothing much, I just want you to wait." "Is this okay?" Yunxiao asked. "That's it?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's it." Yunxiao was about to speak when the iron furnace not far away suddenly shook violently. Then a figure flew out. It was the old man from the smithy. The old man walked in front of Yi Xian with a long box in his hand. Yi Xian was slightly excited. "It's done?" The old man shook his head. "There's still one more step." As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Yunxiao and Yunxiao. When he saw them, his face instantly turned cold. "What are you doing here?" The young man said, "Third uncle, father asked me to invite you back." "Go back?" The old man sneered. "Go back for what?" "Also, I'm no longer a Yun family member, nor am I your third uncle. You two hurry up and scram." The young man said in a low voice. "Third uncle, you're also a Yun family member?" The old man coldly said, "Didn't you hear what I said?" The young man still wanted to say something, but Yunxiao suddenly said, "Brother Yunsheng, the patriarch said that if you don't want to go back, it's fine. However, the Yun family's treasure, the earth vein furnace, must be returned to the Yun family. Apart from that, the Yun family's forging technique must not be taught to outsiders, otherwise..." The old man sneered. "Otherwise what? Otherwise kill me?" Yun Xiao looked at Yun Sheng without saying anything. Yun Sheng suddenly looked at Yi Xian in front of him. "He is my successor. If you have the ability, then kill him." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Fuck, this old man wants to mess with me." Hearing Yun Sheng's words, Yun Xiao and Yun Xiao immediately looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions. Yi Xian smiled. "You two, do you have any objections?" Yun Xiao coldly looked at Yi Xian. Finally he looked at Yun Sheng. "You're on your own." With that, he turned and left with the young man. Yun Sheng fell silent for a moment, and then he looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." With that, he left with Yi Xian. Under Yun Sheng's lead, the two of them arrived before a teleportation formation. In next to no time, the two of them vanished from sight. Around 10 minutes later, the two of them arrived beneath a waterfall. The waterfall was over 100 meters long, and there was a small pool beneath it. "What's this?" Yi Xian asked. Yun Sheng spoke indifferently. "My Yun family opened up a geocentric spiritual spring all those years ago. This is the last step, the watering of the spiritual spring. When my Yun family left, we took almost all of it with us. Now there shouldn't be much left. However, it's enough for us." As he spoke, he tossed the long box in his hand into the pool. In next to no time, the pool shook violently, and rays of sword light shot out from the pool. "Blood." At this moment, Yun Sheng looked at Yi Xian. "2 drops of blood." Yi Xian nodded. With a point of his finger, 2 drops of blood flew into the pool. Bang. The entire pool shook violently all of a sudden. Yi Xian asked nervously, "Senior, there shouldn't be a problem, right?" Yun Sheng replied calmly, "What problem could there be?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "No problem. How could there be a problem, senior?" Yun Sheng glanced at Yi Xian. "You're the most cunning swordsman I've ever met. I'm curious, how did you become a swordsman with your personality? And you even became a sword immortal?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Talent." My master said that I'm the most talented in all of history. Your master said, Yunsheng almost cursed. As if recalling something, he paused and said, the owner of that sword said that? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. My master said that I'm an exceptional sword Dao genius. One day the entire never-ending starfield will submit to my sword. Yi Xian will, stop. The old man suddenly waved his hand. Just pretend that the old man didn't ask. Just stop. Yi Xian was speechless. This continued for about 2 hours before Yunsheng suddenly waved his right hand. A sword with a scabbard suddenly flew out of the pool and landed steadily in front of him. Yunsheng turned to look at Yi Xian and handed the sword to Yi Xian. Take a look. Yi Xian quickly took the sword and unsheathed it. Buzz. A sword's hum suddenly rang through the sky. It was a sword. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide. At first glance it looked like a very, very ordinary sword. Yi Xian looked at the scabbard. The scabbard was dark and there were some mysterious patterns around it. Apart from that, it also emitted a cold and gloomy aura. At this moment Yunsheng suddenly said, this sword only has the shape of your sword. It doesn't have a soul. However, for you now this sword should be just right. As for the scabbard, I forged it with frost iron. Both the sword and the scabbard are Saint grade, and they are both supreme grade Saint grade. Supreme grade Saint grade. Yi Xian was moved. He knew that Saint grade was divided into low grade Saint grade, high grade Saint grade, and supreme grade Saint grade. The scabbard of the sword realm was supreme grade Saint grade. It could be said that it was priceless. Yi Xian put away the sword and looked at Yunsheng. Senior, thank you. Yunsheng glanced at Yi Xian and said calmly, you're welcome. The old man is just a man of his word. Oh, if you really want to thank me, just don't look for the old man in the future. Then he turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, when will you teach me blacksmithing? Blacksmithing? Yunsheng turned to look at Yi Xian. When did the old man promise to teach you blacksmithing? Yi Xian said seriously, Sir, you told me earlier that I am your successor. Yunsheng blinked. You believe that? Yi Xian said, Of course. Yunsheng snorted coldly. The old man said it casually. Why would you believe it? Yi Xian said calmly. Senior said it casually. Those two took it seriously. Saying this, he sighed softly. Sigh, it doesn't matter if Senior teaches me or not. I'm afraid that if I ruin Senior's reputation in the future, then I deserve to die 1,000 times. Yunsheng frowned. Ruin my reputation? How can you ruin my reputation? Yi Xian said seriously, everyone knows that I'm Senior's disciple. If I forge something rubbish, won't Senior's reputation be ruined? Hearing this, Yunsheng's face darkened. He stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned and ran away. Yunsheng was silent for a moment, then he turned and left. Yi Xian returned to Dao Yi Academy. As soon as he returned to Dao Yi Academy, he was summoned by the first elder to Dao Yi Hall. Yi Xian was stunned when he entered the hall. There were 2 people in the hall. They were Yun Xiao and the young man. Yun Xiao was expressionless when he saw Yi Xian, but the young man's face was gloomy. The first elder glanced at Yi Xian. These 2 are from the Yun family in the heaven domain. I heard from Yun Xiao that you had some conflict with them? Conflict? Yi Xian was struck dumb. He was a little confused. What conflict? The first elder's eyes twitched. This guy is playing dumb again. Beside him, Yun Xiao cast a cold glance at Yi Xian. What conflict? He pointed at the young man nearby. Did you cause that wound between his eyebrows? He almost died at your hands. Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, don't talk nonsense. When I sparred with this brother earlier, we were evenly matched. If it wasn't for Senior stopping us in time, I might have already been defeated by this brother. He then cupped his fists at the young man. Brother, you're powerful. Yi Xian admire you. Hearing this, the young man was stunned. Not far away, Yun Zhao's face darkened. Chapter 378. Inside the hall, Yun Xiao stared at Yi Xian, his face extremely gloomy. The first elder suddenly smiled. So it's a sparring session. He looked at Yun Xiao. Brother Yun Xiao, it's inevitable for young people to have some conflicts in a sparring session. Yun Xiao said calmly, I'm so envious that you have such a genius in your academy. The first elder smiled. Not at all. This kid is stubborn and mischievous. I hope Brother Yun Xiao will forgive him if he has offended you. He looked at Yi Xian and said, You may leave. Yi Xian turned around and left. He had too many things to deal with at the moment. If it wasn't for the first elder, he wouldn't even bother with them. A quarter of an hour later, Yun Xiao and Yun Xiao left Dao Yi Academy. Outside the academy, the young man asked, "Uncle Xiao, are we just going to let it go?" Yun Xiao looked at the young man coldly. "What else can I do?" The young man said coldly, "He almost killed me." Yun Xiao said calmly, "He said he sparred with you and almost lost to you. What do you want me to say? Do you want me to tell him that you couldn't even take one move from him?" The young man's face darkened. It was a sneak attack. If it wasn't a sneak attack, why would I? Yun Xiao shook his head. "I've investigated this person. He's a sword immortal at such a young age. He's no ordinary person." He looked at the young man and said, "Our top priority now is to report to our family about Yun Sheng. As for this young man, we'll have plenty of chances to avenge him in the future." After he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. The young man hesitated for a moment. Then he glared in the direction of Dao Yi Academy and followed. Yi Xian arrived at the cultivation room of Dao Yi Academy. Dao Yi Academy had its own cultivation room. These rooms were reinforced by a formation. Not only were they sturdy, but they were also sealed to protect one's life. However, one had to pay a certain amount of purple fire crystals. After handing over the purple fire crystals, Yi Xian entered a cultivation room. Cultivation. What he needed to do now was to fuse the two sword skills. He was already very familiar with the sword skill determining life and death. As for the other sword skill, he had some understanding, but it was not thorough enough. It could be said that one sword to decide life and death was a kind of sword principle belief, a kind of momentum, and the other sword technique was a kind of technique, a pure technique. If the two of them were combined, the power would definitely not be weak. In the following time, Yi Xian started. He cultivated crazily. He unsheathed his sword. He repeated the same action every day, and that was to draw his sword. He drew his sword madly, and what he needed to do was to grasp the explosive point of the moment he drew his sword. At first it was fine and the cultivation went smoothly. But gradually Yi Xian found it difficult. Because he realized that these two sword skills weren't particularly difficult for him if he were to separate them. However, if he wanted to combine them, it would be extraordinarily difficult. Although it was difficult, Yi Xian was very clear that if he could successfully fuse these two sword skills, together with his current sword and scabbard, the power would be incomparably strong. He drew his sword madly. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. On the fourth day, Yi Xian couldn't remember how many times he had drawn his sword. Hard work paid off. Gradually he had some gains. This gain was that after adding the sword drawing technique, his sword determining life and death began to change. It became even stronger. However, these few days he had consumed a lot of energy. This was because every time he drew his sword, it consumed a lot of energy. Fortunately, he had the purple fire crystals, so he had enough energy to sustain his crazy cultivation. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. In the cultivation room, Yi Xian stood quietly. He held the sheathed sword in his left hand and was silent. After standing there for about 15 minutes, his right hand suddenly grasped the hilt of the sword and he drew it. Buzz! A sword chime suddenly resounded. As the sword chime resounded, the entire cultivation room was instantly shaken by the sword chime. Not only the cultivation room but the surrounding space had also cracked. However, Yi Xian shook his head because it was still not enough. It was far from enough. There was still a lot of room for improvement in the explosive power of drawing the sword. However, it was very strenuous for him right now because he had to do it quickly, extremely quickly. Not only did it consume his mind, but it also consumed his physical strength. When he pulled out the sword just now, he discovered that his right arm had already split open. Not only that, but at this moment he felt as if his entire body had been hollowed out and was very weak. The consumption of this sword was too great. The true defensive Dharma state was not enough. He must reach the void-piercing realm. And to reach the void-piercing realm, one must have a sword. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and calculated his current financial situation. He currently had 1.6 million purple origin crystals and 11,000 purple fire crystals. If converted to purple origin crystals, it would be 1 million. This should be enough. Thinking of this, Xian left the world prison pagoda. He didn't go to get his sword because he had more important things to do. Yi Xian arrived at Dao Yi's hall. 15 minutes later, he left Dao Yi's hall and entered the Violet Flame Pagoda. It wasn't long before Yi Xian saw Yanjia, and Yi Xian passed the 3 items he'd obtained from the Grand Elder to Yanjia. Yanjia nodded slightly. "I'll reconstruct her body, but it will take some time. Come back in a month." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, "Will it be dangerous?" Yanjia shook her head. "It's not dangerous. However, reconstructing her body and coupled with the fact that her soul has been shattered, some problems might arise after she's resurrected. I'm not sure about these problems as well. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. No matter what, I'll be troubling you. Yinjia nodded slightly. Let's go. Come back in a month. When she spoke up to this point, she seemed to have thought of something and added, be careful of that Jin Zizai from the 4th floor. He's not simple. Yi Xian said, she probably can't attack me now, right? Yinjia chuckled, not now. However, don't activate the pagoda rashly. If you do, then the seal on the pagoda will weaken. At that time she might be able to do something to you. Activate the pagoda of prison. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. He really didn't dare to activate the pagoda of prison as he pleased now. He was afraid. He was really quite afraid because there would be too much trouble once he activated the pagoda. A short while later, Yi Xian left the underground and returned to Dao Yi Academy. Now he had to find a sword, a high-grade heaven-rank sword. He could only go to 2 places to obtain a sword. The first was the Taihe Trading Company, which was the largest trading company in Dao Yi City. The other was the Immortal Sword Sect, which was the largest swordsman sect in the Northern Territory. The Taihe Trading Company? Yi Xian rejected this thought because there was enmity between him and the Taihe Trading Company, so they would definitely do something to him if he went to look for them. The Immortal Sword Sect? That wouldn't work either. The Immortal Sword Sect wouldn't give him a sword. Steal it? Thinking of this, Yi Xian hesitated. Steal it? That wasn't a good idea. After thinking for a while, Yi Xian suddenly said, borrow it first, I'll return it later. When he finished speaking, he disappeared on the spot. In the pagoda of prison, a voice suddenly rang out. What a shameless person. P.S. Ask for a ticket. Chapter 379. The Immortal Sword Sect. The Immortal Sword Sect had a decisive position in the Northern Domain because there was only one sword cultivator sect in the entire Northern Domain. Swordsman sects had always been rare because swordsmen required great talent and a large amount of cultivation resources. Therefore, without the support of any faction, a person's achievements would be limited even if they were talented. And Yi Xian had deeply felt the importance of money since he had started cultivating. Without enough money, it would be difficult to make any progress on the path of cultivation, especially for him. Every time he broke through, he would need to devour swords. Yi Xian arrived at the Immortal Sword Sect through the teleportation formation in Dao Yi City. The Immortal Sword Sect stood on top of a suspended mountain in the starry sky. The mountain was huge and hung upside down in the starry sky like a sword. Flying swords flew around the mountain from time to time. Majestic. This was Yi Xian's first impression of the Immortal Sword Sect. The Immortal Sword Sect was even more majestic than the Dao Yi Academy. Yi Xian didn't sneak into the Immortal Sword Sect. Instead, he openly walked towards the Immortal Sword Sect. Soon, an old man with a sword on his back appeared in front of him. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and asked, Who are you? Yi Xian said solemnly, This junior is Yi Xian, an inner court student of the Dao Yi Academy. I am here to visit the sect master of the Immortal Sword Sect under the Grand Elder's order. The Dao Yi Academy. The old man frowned. Are you from the Dao Yi Academy? Yi Xian nodded, yes. The old man asked, Do you have proof? Yi Xian took out a token. The old man nodded slightly at the sight of the token. Wait a minute. With that he turned and left. Yi Xian looked around and saw people flying on swords from time to time. These people were very powerful. Meanwhile, the old man from before appeared in front of Yi Xian again, and he said, Come with me. Just like that, Yi Xian followed the old man into the Immortal Sword Sect. The interior of the Immortal Sword Sect was very spacious. There were very few buildings, only a few halls. Along the way, Yi Xian saw many swordsmen. He noticed that these swordsmen were very cold, very cold. He greeted these swordsmen, but they only glanced at him and did not respond. Without a doubt, the Immortal Sword Sect was much more powerful than the Ashen Sword Sect, but compared to the Ashen Sword Sect, it lacked a trace of humanity. Soon Yi Xian and the old man entered the hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian saw a middle-aged man. This person was none other than the sect master of the Immortal Sword Sect, Li Qing. Li Qing glanced at Yi Xian. You are Yi Xian? Yi Xian was stunned. This person had heard of him? Li Qing said lightly, I heard that you are the strongest swordsman in the Dao Yi Academy. Yi Xian smiled. No, it's just SOSO. Li Qing glanced at Yi Xian. State your purpose. Yi Xian smiled. The Grand Elder asked this junior to buy some heaven-class swords from your sect. Heaven-class swords? Li Qing frowned. What does your Dao Yi Academy need heaven-class swords for? Yi Xian said, to make a sword array. Li Qing looked at Yi Xian, it should be for you. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Yes. Li Qing shook his head, my immortal sword sect has a lot of heaven-class swords, but they are not for sale, you can go back. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then nodded, then this junior will take his leave. With that he turned around and left. Inside the hall, Li Qing glanced at Yi Xian who was leaving. It is said that this person became a sword immortal at the age of 16. What do you think? Below, the old man shook his head, it should be impossible, but this person's talent and battle prowess are certainly unquestionable, because he has already defeated one of the 4 monstrous geniuses of the inner courtyard, Nan Shan, and Nan Shan has already reached the origin realm. Li Qing nodded, indeed not bad. Unfortunately he joined the Dao Yi Academy, the old man smiled. It is indeed a bit of a pity. If he was in my immortal sword sect with our full support, it would not be difficult for him to become a great sword immortal in 2 years. Li Qing nodded, tell the people of the Immortal Weapon Pavilion to be careful. Yi Xian is a bit shameless, he should not give up so easily. The old man smiled, it is impossible for him to steal or rob, right? Li Qing said, just be careful. At this moment, a man suddenly walked into the hall. The man slightly bowed to the 2. Sect master, there is a man in the Immortal Sword City who has set up an arena, saying that if you defeat him, you can obtain 100,000 purple origin crystals. Li Qing frowned, is it that Yi Xian? The man nodded, yes. Li Qing and the old man looked at each other. The latter said in a deep voice, what the hell is this guy doing? Immortal Sword City. At this moment, the city was very lively because someone had set up an arena, and it was a swordsman who was not from the Immortal Sword sect. On an arena, Yi Xian stood quietly. There were 2 banners on the left and right sides of the arena. The one on the left was written, Northern Region's #1 Swordsman, and the one on the right was written, if you are not convinced, come and fight. Arrogant. Very, very arrogant. Soon, many swordsmen from the Immortal Sword sect heard the noise and rushed over. A man flew to the arena, he glanced at Yi Xian and sneered, what a big tone, claiming to be the Northern Region's #1 Swordsman, come, let me fight you. Yi Xian said lightly, if you want to challenge me sure, but according to the rules, first take out a heaven-grade sword. If you lose, the sword will belong to me. If I lose, I will give you 100,000 purple origin crystals. The man's face was a little ugly, I don't have a sword. Yi Xian said angrily, if you don't have a sword, why are you hitting the hammer? Next. The man said angrily, this father wants to hit you. The man's voice suddenly stopped because a sword was pointed at his eyebrows. The surroundings suddenly quietened down. Yi Xian put away his sword, go down. The man did not say anything, he turned around and ran. In this way, after Yi Xian waited for about half a quarter of an hour, a sword-wielding swordsman suddenly flew to the arena. Yi Xian said lightly, do you know the rules? The swordsman glanced at Yi Xian, yes. After saying that, he flicked his finger and a sword flew to the side. A heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian smiled and said, make your move. The swordsman suddenly disappeared, and in the next moment, a sword light directly chopped down at Yi Xian's head. Quick sword strike. However, this sword abruptly stopped a few inches away from Yi Xian's head, because the sword in Yi Xian's hand was already at the swordsman's throat. He lost. The swordsman stared at Yi Xian, his eyes solemn. Yi Xian put away his sword and said with a smile, next. The swordsman glanced at Yi Xian, then turned around and left. Yi Xian put away the heaven-grade sword at his side. His heart was filled with joy. In fact, he knew very well that being so high profile, it was easy to be beaten. However, he had no other choice but to resort to such a method. If he wanted to break through now, he must get his hands on a sword, but he certainly could not go to Taihe Commerce. The Immortal Sword sect did not want to sell, he could only use this method to obtain a sword. Soon, another man leaped onto the stage. In this way, about an hour later, Yi Xian had obtained 7 heaven-grade swords. Gradually, the number of people on the arena decreased. Because everyone found that Yi Xian's strength was very strong. The people on the arena could not take a single sword strike from Yi Xian. At this moment, a sword cry suddenly sounded from the distant sky, followed by a sword light falling on the arena. It was a young man about 20 years old, wearing a white robe, carrying a sword case on his back, and on the left side of his chest, there was a small, immortal character. It's the Immortal Sword Sect. Someone exclaimed in the field. The Immortal Sword Sect. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The white-robed man looked at Yi Xian, you're from Dao Yi Academy. Yi Xian nodded, Dao Yi Academy. The white-robed man glanced at the two banners of Yi Xian. "I'll make you swallow them later." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Where's the sword?" The white-robed man waved his right hand. A heaven-grade sword fell to the side. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Make your move." The white-robed man shook his head. He waved his right hand again, and 4 heaven-grade swords fell to the side, a total of 5 swords. The white-robed man looked at Yi Xian. "Do you dare to block it?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "How?" The white-robed man said indifferently, "If I lose, these 5 swords are yours. If you lose, not only will you swallow the 2 banners, but you will also kneel at the foot of the mountain of the Immortal Sword Sect for 3 days and 3 nights. Do you dare?" Yi Xian smiled, "All right." The white-robed man glanced at Yi Xian. "You're very confident." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword suddenly soared into the sky from the sheath on his back. The sword pierced the sky, and in the next moment, a sword chi shot down from the sky, heading straight for Yi Xian on the arena. Sword Sovereign. The moment the white-robed man drew his sword, a powerful sword aura swept across the arena. Sword Sovereign's aura. It was a swift strike. However, Yi Xian was even swifter. Before the sword chi descended onto the arena, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the white-robed man. At the same time, his sword was pressed firmly against the white-robed man's throat. "I lost?" The surroundings were deathly silent. The white-robed man stared fixedly at Yi Xian as he stood before Yi Xian. "You're a sword immortal." Yi Xian grinned. He put his sword away and then he walked over to the side and put away those 5 swords. Coupled with the 7 swords from before, he now had a total of 12 heaven-rank swords. Moreover, he already had around 10 heaven-rank swords, so he had over 20 now. But it wasn't enough. It was far from enough. Presently, the more heaven-rank swords he had, the better it was for him. The white-robed man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he turned around and left. Somewhere in the shadows, the Immortal Sword Sect Master, Li Qing, gazed at Yi Xian on the arena, and no one knew what he was thinking. Beside Li Qing stood an old man, and the old man spoke in a low voice. "This person's combat strength is extraordinary. Even those elite disciples might not be able to defeat him." Li Qing's face was expressionless. His objective should be the swords. The old man nodded. "I didn't expect him to use such a method to get the swords." At this point he paused slightly and continued, "What should we do next? We can't just ignore it. If we don't, then the Immortal Sword Sect will become a laughingstock in the Northern Territory." Li Qing spoke indifferently. "Don't those fellows from the inner sect usually fight very fiercely? Now it's time for them to show themselves." The old man thought for a moment and then he said, "Right, internal strife isn't much of a skill. Now it's time for them to show themselves." With that he turned around and left. 2 hours later, nearly 100 swordsmen from the Immortal Sword Sect suddenly descended the mountain and headed straight for Immortal Sword City. Chapter 380. After learning that Yi Xian had set up an arena in the Immortal Sword City, all the disciples of the Immortal Sword Sect were furious. Because in the eyes of the Immortal Sword Sect, Yi Xian's action was undoubtedly a provocation to the entire Immortal Sword Sect. Who didn't know that the Immortal Sword Sect was the #1 swordsman sect in the northern region? Yi Xian had set up an arena in the territory of the Immortal Sword Sect and called himself the #1 swordsman in the northern region. This was a blatant provocation to the Immortal Sword Sect. How could the Immortal Sword Sect tolerate this? Soon, the disciples of the Immortal Sword Sect entered the Immortal Sword City. Daoyi Academy. In the Daoyi Palace, the Great Elder was discussing something with everyone. At this moment, a man in black quietly appeared beside the Great Elder. The man in black said something and the Great Elder suddenly stood up. He went to the Immortal Sword City to challenge the Immortal Sword Sect? In the palace, everyone looked at the Great Elder, somewhat confused. The man in black nodded slightly. "It has already begun." The Great Elder frowned. "What the hell is this guy doing?" Not far away an old man asked. "What's wrong?" The Great Elder said in a deep voice. Yi Xian went to the Immortal Sword City. He set up an arena and called himself the #1 swordsman in the northern region. Hearing this, the old man who spoke frowned. He went to challenge the Immortal Sword Sect? The Great Elder shook his head. He didn't go to challenge the Immortal Sword Sect. He probably went to get the sword. Saying this, he shook his head and sighed. "This guy is really not easy to deal with," the old man said in a deep voice. "Great Elder, Yi Xian is really restless. Ever since he entered our Daoyi Academy, this kind of thing has been happening more and more. I'm afraid he will implicate our Daoyi Academy in the future." Hearing this, the palace quieted down. Yi Xian. Everyone acknowledged Yi Xian's talent, but Yi Xian's ability to cause trouble was really terrifying. Too restless. A beautiful woman at the side suddenly smiled and said, "Actually, there are pros and cons to this." Everyone looked at the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman smiled and said, "Why don't you all think about it? If he wants to cause trouble, why can he cause trouble? Because he was capable." Moreover, when this person entered the inner court, it was Nanshan who provoked him first, and that's why he started fighting with Nanshan. Besides Nanshan, did any of you see him provoking anyone else? Not only that, according to what I know, there are more than 10 people following him now. Even Ming Kuan, one of the 4 monstrous geniuses, is following him. This proves that he has a certain amount of charisma. Not far away, the old man smiled bitterly. Instructor Huixan, have you ever thought that if he continues to cause trouble outside, he will make many enemies for our Dao Yi Academy? The teacher named Huixan said calmly, "Everyone forgive me for being blunt. Students who are capable of causing trouble are not scary. The scary ones are the students of Dao Yi Academy who haven't caused any trouble." Hearing this, everyone's expression turned serious. Students who didn't cause any trouble. This meant that there was no one in the academy. Every single power had to be supported by formidable resources and reserves, but the younger generation had to have people. If there was no one in the younger generation, then they wouldn't be able to speak with confidence. Because the younger generation represented the future. That was why talents were the most important in this era. No one within the hall spoke, and all of them looked at the Grand Elder. The dean wasn't here, so the Grand Elder made all the decisions. The Grand Elder fell silent for a short while before he said, "Let's wait and see for now." The old man asked, "Shouldn't we stop him?" The Grand Elder spoke indifferently, "Stop him? Oh. Now, even if that kid is willing to leave, the Immortal Sword sect won't let the matter go." As he spoke, he stood up, "Let's go and have a look." Immortal Sword City. The crowd below the arena parted, and over 100 disciples of the Immortal Sword sect arrived before the arena. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw so many disciples of the Immortal Sword sect. This matter is getting out of hand. 2 men and a woman walked up the arena. All of them were young, around the age of 20. The 3 swords of the North. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, "It's the 3 sword immortals of the North." The 3 sword immortals of the North. There were many relatively famous people amongst the younger generation of the North, and the 3 sword immortals of the North were 3 of them. Because all 3 of them were sword immortals and they were only 20 years old. The man in the lead glanced at the 2 banners of Yi Xian, and then he looked at Yi Xian. "You're talking big." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. "I presume the 3 of you are the monstrous geniuses of the Immortal Sword sect. May I know your name?" The man in the lead shook his head. "You're not qualified to know my name." Yi Xian smiled. "Then let's begin? Which one of you will come first? Or should I say all at once? Together?" The crowd instantly went into an uproar when they heard Yi Xian. Who does he think he is? All at once? Is he crazy? How arrogant. I've never seen such an arrogant person in my entire life. He's ignorant. In the arena, the faces of the 3 turned pale when they heard what Yi Xian had said. The man in the lead smiled and he shook his head slightly. 1 against 3? You know that we won't fight 3 against 1, but you still say that. You're so scheming. With that, he waved his right hand and 10 swords appeared at the side of the ring. They were all heaven stage. The man in the lead looked at Yi Xian. "I'll raise the stakes. If you lose, you'll have to swallow these 2 banners. Not only that, you'll have to kneel at the foot of the mountain of the Immortal Sword sect for a month." Yi Xian looked at the 3 swords and then he shook his head. "Too little. I'm losing. After all, if you lose, you'll only lose 10 swords, but if I lose, I'll be humiliated." The man said indifferently, "Then how many do you want?" Yi Xian raised 3 fingers. 30. If I lose, not only will I swallow these banners, I'll also kneel at the foot of the Immortal Sword sect for a year. Kneel for a year. Hearing this, the man in front of Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. "It seems that you're very confident in yourself." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to bet?" The man fell silent. He didn't have 30 heaven stage swords. As if he thought of something, he turned to look at the woman and the man beside him. The 2 of them fell silent for a moment, and then they pointed with their fingers, and 20 heaven stage swords appeared near the ring. A total of 30 heaven stage swords. In the darkness far away, the old man beside Li Qing smiled slightly. When facing an external enemy, they can unite. Sure. Li Qing also nodded slightly. People on the same side could compete with each other and even fight amongst themselves, but if they fought against an external enemy and didn't unite, then even if they were monstrous geniuses, the sect wouldn't want such people. In the distant ring, the man in front of Yi Xian looked at Yi Xian. "Let's begin?" Yi Xian smiled. "Let's begin." As soon as he finished speaking, the man opened his palm, and a sword suddenly condensed into form in his palm. At the same time, a strand of sword intent suddenly appeared around the ring. A sword immortal. The surroundings instantly seethed with excitement when they witnessed this scene. In the arena, Yi Xian nodded slightly as well. Based on the aura and sword intent of the man before him, he was very strong indeed. Yi Xian didn't act carelessly, and a sword chest appeared behind him. At the same time, a sword appeared in his hand. Aurangaya. He didn't dare act carelessly against the man before him. The man suddenly took a step forward, and his figure instantly became ethereal. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's expression changed abruptly because a few rays of light had appeared in front of him. These rays of light were as small as the tips of needles, and all of them were aimed at his vital points. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and the sword in his hand swiftly slashed forward. It was just a simple slash. As soon as this slash was executed, countless strands of the energy of the earth sprayed out from the sword. Bang! The arena beneath their feet instantly collapsed into pieces. At the same time, two figures retreated explosively, and it was Yi Xian and the man. The battlefield between them had grown larger. The two of them stopped at almost the same time. The moment Yi Xian stopped, several swords suddenly flew out from the sword case on his back. They were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of the man. The man's expression changed drastically when he saw these swords, and he didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest. He swiftly pressed his palms forward, and then countless swords of energy instantly shot out from his palms. Bang! Countless strands of sword energy shot towards the surroundings. The spectators in the surroundings were horrified, and they retreated repeatedly. They didn't dare approach the two of them at all. Right amidst this expanse of sword energy, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and arrived above the man. In the next moment, a strand of sword energy slashed down at an extremely swift speed. The man's pupils constricted slightly when he witnessed this scene. In the next moment, he suddenly pressed his palms together, and then two enormous swords suddenly appeared above him. At the same time, the two enormous swords clamped down on Yi Xian's attack. However, the ground beneath his feet instantly collapsed. This clearly showed how terrifying this attack was. However, the man had still forcefully resisted this attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had retreated over 10 back, but the sword in his hand had changed. The sword of earth had transformed into the sword of space. At the moment the swords changed, the expressions of Li Qing and the man who were hiding in the shadows below had instantly changed drastically. The man's expression instantly changed drastically as well. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had appeared in front of him once more. At the same time, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down once more. There weren't any flashy movements, and it was just a simple attack. The man stomped his right foot on the ground, pressed his palms together, and then pulled them apart. As soon as he did this, a ray of light shot out from the center of his brows. Boom! A sword howl resounded through the sky. Bang! A figure instantly retreated explosively. It was exactly Yi Xian. At the instant Yi Xian retreated, the man heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and he was just about to follow up with another attack. However, a few swords suddenly flashed out from the space around him. Void flash. These swords had appeared without any warning, and the man hadn't expected that so many swords would suddenly appear. He was stunned for a moment, and by the time he recovered from his shock, those swords had already arrived at all the vital points on his body. But it didn't take long for all these swords to vanish, and no one was able to see them clearly. In the arena, the man was slightly dazed. Li Qing and the man who were hiding in the shadows had slightly gloomy expressions. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the arena, suddenly cupped his fists at the man and said with a smile, as expected of the three sword immortals of the northern region, "I, Yi Xian, am impressed. How about we call it a draw today?" The man was stunned, and so were Li Qing and the man below. Meanwhile, Yi Xian put away the 30 swords and smiled. "The immortal sword sect is amazing. I, Yi Xian, admire you. If I have the chance in the future, I'll come and seek guidance from the seniors of the immortal sword sect. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The crowd was speechless. Chapter 381. In the immortal sword city, everyone looked at each other. Was it a draw? In the arena, the man watched Yi Xian leave in silence. On the other side, the man and the woman were also silent. because they knew that Yi Xian held back. Not only did he hold back, but he also saved the face of the Immortal Sword sect. One must know that if Yi Xian really trampled on the man, he would not only lose the man's face, but also the face of the entire Immortal Sword sect. But Yi Xian did not do so. At this time, the man who fought with Yi Xian suddenly said, "He is very strong, but he has not used his full strength." After saying that, he turned and left. In the Immortal Sword City, the crowd also gradually dispersed. Regarding the tie between Yi Xian and the man, everyone could still accept it as long as the Immortal Sword sect did not lose. As soon as Yi Xian left the Immortal Sword City, Li Qing and an old man appeared in front of him. Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Greetings, seniors." Seeing this, the two secretly nodded in their hearts. Li Qing glanced at Yi Xian. "You came here for the sword?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Yes. There are no swords in the academy, and I have some grudges with the Taihe Chamber of Commerce, so I have no choice but to come here. If I have offended you, I hope Sect Master Li can forgive me." Li Qing was silent for a moment, and then he bent his finger and a storage ring fell in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at it, and inside the storage ring, there were 12 heaven stage swords and they were all high grade. Yi Xian looked at Li Qing with some confusion. "This is?" Li Qing said, "Thank you for holding back. If you have time next time, you can come to the Immortal Sword sect to exchange with them." After saying that, he turned and left. In the same place, Yi Xian smiled slightly, put away the storage ring, and disappeared at the end of the sky on his sword. In the dark, the Great Elder and the others nodded as they watched Yi Xian leave. Next to the Great Elder, an old man softly said, "This guy. Not only is he extremely talented, he is also extremely thick-skinned. He also knows when to stop." After causing such a ruckus, not only did the Immortal Sword sect not view him as an enemy, they are instead grateful to him. At this point he looked at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder said, "Let's go back." Soon everyone left. Yi Xian returned to the Dao Yi Academy. At this moment, the Xiumen had grown to 15 members, while there were less than 40 students in the inner yard. After returning to the inner yard, Yi Xian began to cultivate. Break through to the void-piercing realm. Right now he clearly felt that his realm was not high enough. This was because some powerful sword techniques required the support of one's realm. Right now he had close to 70 heaven-grade swords. 70 heaven-grade swords. Yi Xian entered a cultivation room, sat cross-legged on the ground, and took out all the heaven-grade swords he had. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he suddenly stabbed a sword into his body. Devour. Devour madly. In the cultivation room, Yi Xian's aura started to grow stronger bit by bit. While Yi Xian was cultivating, an old man led 2 experts in golden black armor to Dao Yi City. The old man glanced at Dao Yi City, sneered coldly, and then entered the city. A quarter of an hour later, the 3 of them arrived at the Dao Yi Academy. The Grand Elder was the one who received the 3 of them. In the Dao Yi Palace, the Grand Elder glanced at the 3 of them and said, "You are?" The old man smiled. "Old man, the guest elder of the Dugu clan Mu Tian. I'm here on behalf of the Dugu clan." The Grand Elder's face changed slightly. "Is it the Dugu clan from the Heaven region?" The old man nodded. "Yes." The Grand Elder's face became slightly solemn. A short while later, the Grand Elder said, "May I know why you're here?" The old man smiled. "The Dugu clan would like to ask for 2 people from your academy." 2 people? The Grand Elder frowned. "Who are they?" The old man looked the Grand Elder in the eye. "Yi Xian and Yi Ling." The Grand Elder was stunned when he heard that. A short while later, he spoke in a low voice. "What do you mean?" Mu Tian spoke in a low voice. "Grand Elder, this is a scandal of the Dugu clan, so I won't dwell on it. I'm here to take them back with me." The Grand Elder spoke in a low voice. "They're from the Dugu clan?" Mu Tian laughed coldly. "Of course not." He cupped his fists. "Grand Elder, please hand them over to me so that the old man can take them back." The Grand Elder spoke solemnly. "They're students of the Dao Yi Academy." Mu Tian's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, Grand Elder?" The Grand Elder laughed. "If they're willing to go back with you, the Dao Yi Academy will not stop them. They have absolute freedom. But if he doesn't want to leave, my Dao Yi Academy won't force him and his sister to leave." Mu Tian laughed coldly. "Grand Elder, is the Dao Yi Academy going to meddle in the Dugu clan's affairs?" The Grand Elder shook his head. "I'm not interested in the Dugu clan's affairs. I just hope that you understand that they're students of the Dao Yi Academy, that's all." Mu Tian stared at the Grand Elder. "So, the Dao Yi Academy is not willing to hand them over?" The Grand Elder's face turned cold. "What? Are you going to snatch them by force?" Mu Tian's expression turned savage. If this was the era of Dao Yi Mu, the Dugu clan might be wary of the Dao Yi Academy. But now, the old man, if the Dao Yi Academy does not hand them over, the Dao Yi Academy will regret it for life. After that, he turned to leave. Inside the hall, the Grand Elder's expression was dark, not knowing what he was thinking. After a while he spoke, "Gather all the teachers." Very quickly the teachers of the Dao Yi Academy gathered in the Dao Yi Hall. Hand over the Yishen siblings? How can we do that? If the Dao Yi Academy hands them over, how are we going to establish ourselves in the northern region? We can't. If we hand over the Yishen siblings, the people of the northern region will laugh at our Dao Yi Academy. We can't do such a shameful thing. The Dugu clan is too domineering, they even have their hands in the northern region. They won't let this go. After a while the hall quietened down and everyone looked at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder smiled. It's rare for everyone to have such a unified opinion. As he spoke he looked out of the hall. But this time I'm afraid the Dugu clan won't let this matter go, informed the dean. Below, an old man said in a low voice, "Is it that serious?" The Grand Elder smiled bitterly. "It's more than serious. You know too little about the Dugu clan. This clan has an important position in the heavenly region. Even when the Dao Yi Academy was at its peak, we might not be able to go against them." In the cultivation room, Yi Xian had already devoured more than 20 swords, and his aura was slowly becoming stronger. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. 3 days later, Yi Xian had already devoured more than 50 swords, and his aura was much stronger than before. On the 4th day, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes in the cultivation room, and 2 balls of sword light shot out from his eyes. Chi-chi. 2 bottomless cracks appeared on the wall in the distance. At the same time, a powerful aura spread out from Yi Xian's body. Void-piercing realm. After devouring 67 heaven-grade swords, he finally reached the void-piercing realm. After reaching the void-piercing realm, Yi Xian pressed his right hand forward lightly, and in an instant the space in his palm split open. Then, countless dark energies surged out from the cracks in the space. Feeling the dark energies, Yi Xian's expression became serious. He now understood why void-piercing realm experts were stronger than true defensive realm experts. The dark energies were really strong and even he felt his heart palpitate. Without thinking too much about it, after reaching the void-piercing realm, Yi Xian continued to practice his sword skills. But now, every time he drew his sword, he did not feel that it was so strenuous. However, every time he drew the sword, it consumed a lot of energy. In his current situation he could only draw it twice in an hour at most. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian smiled. This sword skill is a fusion of 2 sword skills, so I have to give it a new name. What should I name it? As he said that, he fell into deep thought. After a moment, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Let's just call it sword draw to determine life and death. After laughing, he suddenly thought of something. With a wave of his right hand, 2 swords appeared in front of him. Dark Azure Sword and the sword that Yun Sheng had forged for him. These 2 swords were Saint grade. Of course, the sword that Yun Sheng had forged for him was better. As for the sword that Yun Sheng had forged for him, he named it Spiritual Immortal. Previously he had madly practiced sword draw to determine life and death, but he had used ordinary swords. He had never used this Spiritual Immortal, because he did not dare to use it. If he used this sword, he would definitely be able to destroy the entire cultivation room. Although he was very curious about the power of this sword combined with sword draw to determine life and death, he did not try it. Leave some suspense. Yi Xian left the cultivation room and went to the underground world under the purple flame path. He had never forgotten about Yu Qi's matter. However, when he arrived at the hall, the door of the hall was tightly shut. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. He was about to sneak in when the door suddenly opened and a voice was heard. "Come in." It was Yanjia's voice. Yi Xian hurriedly walked in. In front of Yanjia there was a long, fiery red table. A woman was lying on the table. This woman was Yu Qi. Yu Qi was lying there quietly. There was no aura coming from her body. Most importantly, she was completely naked at that moment. Seeing this, Yi Xian looked at Yanjia. "Can't you put some clothes on her?" Yanjia glanced at Yi Xian. Her body is still being molded. She cannot be touched by external objects. Hearing this, Yi Xian nodded. "I see." At this moment, Yanjia said, "You came at the right time. I need your help with something." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What is it?" Yanjia said, "Do you have the chaotic energy in your body?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned. "How do you know?" Yanjia said, "What do you think?" Yi Xian smiled. He had almost forgotten that Yinjia was originally from the prison pagoda. Yinjia pointed at Yu Qi. Use your chaotic energy to nourish her body. Yi Xian said, put the chaotic energy in her body? Yinjia nodded. She has no consciousness yet. After you put the chaotic energy in her body, you need to guide it to nourish her body. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. During this process you need to touch her entire body. You won't have any bad thoughts, right? Yi Xian. Chapter 382. He touched his entire body. Yi Xian stood there in a daze for a long time. In the end he looked at Yinjia and said, Senior can do this for me, right? Yinjia looked at Yi Xian and said, Yes, but your chaotic qi is a godly item. Don't you feel at ease leaving it to me? Yi Xian smiled and waved his right hand. The strand of chaotic qi appeared in front of Yinjia before he turned and retreated to the side. Yinjia glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything else as he started to control the chaotic qi to help Yu Qi nourish her body. Yi Xian waited silently by the side. Looking at Yu Qi in the distance, Yi Xian thought of the Azure World and the Azure Sword sect. Time slowly passed. Roughly 2 days later, Yu Qi suddenly opened her eyes and Yi Xian hurriedly walked over. Yu Qi's eyes were somewhat dazed and Yi Xian hurriedly said, Master Yu? Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian and said, You are? Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression darkened and he turned to look at Yinjia. The latter said, Her body and soul have just fused and her memories have not fully recovered yet. Give her some time. Yi Xian nodded and then looked at Yu Qi and smiled, Don't you remember me? Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian and frowned slightly and said, I have a slight impression. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's fine. Think about it in the future. At this moment, Yu Qi looked at her body and found that she was completely naked. Her frown deepened and then she looked at Yi Xian and asked, Did you take it off? Yi Xian hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, it was the senior beside you who took it off. She saved you. Yu Qi looked at Yinjia who was nearby and then she stood up. Yi Xian hurriedly turned around and said, Master Yu, put on some clothes first. Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian and said, You've seen everything anyway, haven't you? Yi Xian was speechless. Yu Qi bowed slightly towards Yinjia. Thank you. Yinjia asked, You can remember some things, right? Yu Qi nodded. Yinjia nodded, Right now your physical body and soul have just fused. You can't recover your strength for the time being. You can consider recovering your strength after your physical body and soul have completely fused. Do you understand? Yu Qi nodded, then turned to look at Yi Xian. Give me some clothes. Yi Xian hurriedly withdrew a robe and draped it over Yu Qi. He hesitated for a moment before he said, You really don't remember me? Yu Qi glanced at him but did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. It's nothing. I'll think about it slowly in the future. With that, he looked at Yinjia who was not far away. Senior, I want her to stay here temporarily. The current Yu Qi did not have any strength at all. If they followed him back to the surface, it would undoubtedly be extremely dangerous. Yinjia replied, It's up to her. Yi Xian turned to look at Yu Qi. It's quite dangerous outside now. You should stay here and slowly recover your strength. Is that all right? Yu Qi was silent for a moment before she said, How is Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian softly said, The Realm Defense Alliance has been destroyed. Uncle Master Jian Xian, Sect Master, Uncle Master Zhan Tai and the others, have all died. Yu Qi was silent. Yi Xian softly said, Uncle Master Tsang Xian and Uncle Master Gu are still alive. Pale Sword Sect will only grow stronger and stronger in the future. Yu Qi shook her head slightly before she softly said, Go back. Yi Xian was silent for a while before he turned to leave. When he reached the entrance of the hall, he suddenly stopped. Are you blaming me? Yu Qi did not reply. Yi Xian waited for a while but did not receive a reply. He left the hall. Inside the hall, Yinjia suddenly said, He cares a lot about you. Yu Qi softly said, I don't blame him. Yinjia asked, Then why didn't you tell him directly? Yu Qi said, I was thinking about something and my mind wandered. Yinjia, the Grand Elder, found Yi Xian the moment he left the underground. Something happened to the old man in the smithy. Yinsheng? Yi Xian frowned. What happened? The Grand Elder said in a low voice, There was a huge battle in Daoyi City, and the smithy was destroyed. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. This should be an internal matter of the Yun family. You won't want to interfere, right? Yi Xian was taken aback. Of course not. The Grand Elder softly said, Because of that supreme treasure, many people are coveting you. Don't get involved in this mess. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The Grand Elder nodded. Do you know the Dugu family? Yi Xian shook his head. Never heard of it. The Grand Elder looked at Yi Xian but did not speak. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I really haven't heard of it. The Grand Elder hesitated, then said, It's a large family from the Heaven Domain. Anyway, before the Dean comes back, try not to leave the academy. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Is someone trying to mess with me again? The Grand Elder glanced at him. You try to keep a low profile for now. As he spoke, he turned and left. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then turned and disappeared. Soon Yi Xian came to Dao Yi City. When he came to the smithy again, it was gone. Something happened. Yi Xian's face darkened. He looked around, and at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Yun Sheng. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Yun Sheng grabbed him and disappeared. Outside Dao Yi City, Yun Sheng brought Yi Xian to a deep mountain under a waterfall. As soon as they landed, Yun Sheng sat on the ground. Yi Xian's face changed because he found that Yun Sheng was seriously injured. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior? Yun Sheng glanced at Yi Xian. Do you want to forge weapons? Yi Xian hesitated, then said, A little. Yun Sheng suddenly said angrily, What do you mean a little? Yi Xian hurriedly said, I mean, is it profitable to forge weapons? Yun Sheng said angrily, Nonsense, in the Heaven Domain being a blacksmith is the most honorable profession, and also the richest one. Do you think it's profitable? Yi Xian hurriedly said, Yes, I really want to be a blacksmith, really? Yun Sheng let out a low sigh. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated look in his eyes. Yi Xian said, Senior, take care of your wounds first. Yun Sheng shook his head, I don't have that much time. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Yun Sheng suddenly looked at him, took out a fist-sized black seal and put it in front of him. This seal contains my Yun family's inheritance of blacksmithing, as well as a treasure of my Yun family. Now I give it to you. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, what are you doing? Yun Sheng shook his head, All these years I've been looking for a successor, hoping to leave my lifelong knowledge, but I haven't been able to find one. Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian, I didn't expect that my lifelong inheritance would be passed on to you. Yi Xian smiled bitterly, Senior, do you look down on me a little? Yun Sheng said indifferently, You're not particularly suitable for blacksmithing, but if you really like blacksmithing you can learn diligently, and your achievements in blacksmithing will not be low in the future. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, let's put the matter of blacksmithing aside for now. You take care of your wounds first. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared not far in front of the two. Yi Xian knew this old man. It was Yun Xiao who had left earlier. Behind Yun Xiao there were two other old men. Yun Xiao glanced coldly at Yun Sheng and sneered, I knew you would appear in the smithy again. Saying this, he glanced at Yi Xian and his expression was cold. We meet again. Yi Xian looked at Yun Sheng and the latter said in a low voice, I'll hold them back, you go back to Dao Yi Academy. Hold them back. In the distance Yun Xiao sneered, Yun Sheng, can you hold them back? Yun Sheng ignored Yun Xiao and looked at Yi Xian and said angrily, What are you waiting for? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, Senior, actually, I'm very good at fighting. Fight my ass. Yun Sheng said angrily, Can you beat 3 Origin Realm experts at once? Yi Xian thought about it, Perhaps I can try. Yun Sheng, Yi Xian turned around and walked towards Yun Xiao and the other two nearby. Can you give me, Yi Xian, some face? Yun Xiao sneered, Give you face? At this moment Yi Xian, who was in front of him, suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, Yi Xian was already in front of him. Yun Xiao's expression changed drastically, but he reacted extremely quickly, and a powerful aura swept out from his body. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. A single strike to decide life and death. Boom. As the sword fell, Yun Xiao was knocked several hundred meters away. Yun Sheng, who was about to act, was stunned when he saw this. In the distance Yun Xiao was also stunned. So powerful? Yi Xian continued to walk towards Yun Xiao and the other two. You three come at me together. Otherwise it'll be too easy. Yun Xiao was infuriated when he heard that. How arrogant of you. With that, he suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, a powerful force shot towards Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian stopped. Suddenly a flying sword flashed through the air. Something seemed to have been ripped apart. A moment later the surroundings fell silent. Yun Xiao stopped around 3 meters away from Yi Xian, and there was a sword pressed against his forehead. A dark red sword. The dark blue sword. At this moment Yi Xian was rather surprised because this was the first time he had used the dark blue sword. He had never thought that the Saint Tyr dark blue sword would be so fast. It was so fast that even an Origin Realm expert would not be able to react in time. It was too fast. Not far away, Yunxing's face was also solemn. Yi Xian's strength had somewhat exceeded his expectations. As if he had thought of something, he glanced at Yi Xian, and the expression in his eyes changed slightly. Yun Xiao stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At that moment he was extremely shocked because he had never thought that Yi Xian would be so good at fighting. Even he could not fight back at all. He was too much of a monster. Yi Xian smiled. If I let you go, will you still come looking for trouble with me? Yun Xiao said coldly, Yi Xian, this is a matter of my Yun family. If you interfere, my Yun family will never let you go. Yi Xian grinned, I have no intention of making enemies, but if anyone wants to become enemies with me, then I'll keep them company. With that he swung his sword. Swish. Yun Zhao's head flew into the air. Chapter 383. Killed. Behind Yi Xian, Yunsheng was dumbfounded. Killed just like that? The other two Origin Realm experts were stunned as well. They never thought that Yi Xian would directly kill them. They were representing the Yun family. However, at this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The two remaining Origin Realm experts' expressions changed drastically as they hurriedly attacked. 1 against 2. Roughly half an hour later, the surroundings fell silent. 3 corpses lay in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood before the 3 corpses with his eyes closed. He was currently absorbing the energy of the 3 corpses with his netherworld ring. In the distance, Yunsheng looked at Yi Xian sternly. Yi Xian's battle prowess had greatly exceeded his expectations. After a long while, Yi Xian put away the ethereal execution ring, and then put away the storage rings of Yun Xiao and the other 2. There were more than 1,000,000 purple origin crystals in the storage rings. There were also over 30 heaven-rank treasures, but there wasn't a single saint-rank treasure. Do you know what you've done? At this moment Yunsheng suddenly spoke up. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, are you trying to say that the Yun family won't let me off because I killed a member of the Yun family? Yunsheng nodded. The Yun family isn't as simple as you think. Yi Xian said, that's exactly why I killed the 3 of them. Now who will know that I killed a member of the Yun family? He looked at Yunsheng. Senior, you won't tell on me, right? Yunsheng glanced at Yi Xian, but did not say anything. Yi Xian walked in front of Yunsheng and smiled. Senior, do you want to return to the Dao Yi Academy with me, or? Yunsheng shook his head. I won't be going back. He looked at Yi Xian as he spoke. You'll stay here with me and learn the art of forging. Yi Xian hurriedly bowed. Greetings, master. Yunsheng shook his head with a smile. You? Blacksmithing. In the following period of time, Yi Xian followed Yunsheng to learn forging techniques every day. He studied very seriously because he knew that he would need a lot of swords in the future, and he didn't have the financial resources to buy all of them. Make it yourself. Yunsheng was also very satisfied with Yi Xian. It should be said that Yi Xian surprised him because Yi Xian studied very hard, was very serious, and absorbed very quickly. Therefore Yunsheng was more and more satisfied with Yi Xian. The more Yi Xian learned, the more excited he became. He realized that the path of forging was very interesting. Every time he saw something he forged, he would feel a sense of accomplishment. Hence Yi Xian became even more attentive. At night, Yi Xian returned to the Dao Yi Academy. As soon as he returned to the Dao Yi Academy, he was called to the Violet Flame Tower by Xiao Gu. In the cave, the people of the Xiao school had already arrived. There were a total of 13 people, all of whom were void-piercing realm experts. Among them, Ming Kuan might have already reached the Origin Realm. Of course, this was just Yi Xian's guess and he didn't ask. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Gu. This guy gathered everyone together, so there must be something. Xiao Gu chuckled and said with some excitement, Brother Yi, something happened in our northern region recently. Have you heard about it? Yi Xian asked, What is it? Xiao Gu said, A small world was discovered several 100,000 li south of here. It was just discovered. Small world? Yi Xian frowned. And then? On the side, Ming Kuan said with a smile, Brother Yi might not know, but if it was just discovered, it means that this small world has not been occupied by anyone, and the resources on it are unclaimed. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. As if thinking of something, he looked at Xiao Gu. Who discovered it? Xiao Gu said in a low voice, I don't know, but it should spread to all the major forces soon. So, we have to go first. Yi Xian said, There must be many people who want such a good thing, right? Xiao Gu said with a smile, Of course there will be many people going this time. However, how much you can obtain from it will depend on your own ability. Brother Yi, are you interested in going? Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Go." Xiao Gu said with a smile, "Okay, there's no time to lose, let's go immediately." Yi Xian said, "Are you not going to tell the Great Elder and the others?" Xiao Gu said, "I have already told the Great Elder. The Great Elder and the others don't object to this matter. They just want us to be careful and inform the inner court immediately if anything happens." Hearing this, Yi Xian sighed in his heart. It's good to have a backer. The Great Elder's meaning was that if they went there and couldn't win, they could inform the academy. But if they were independent cultivators and couldn't win, they could either run or die. The difference in treatment was too great. An hour later, the 13 of them set off. In the starry sky, the 13 of them sat on the star cloud ship and headed straight for the newly discovered small world. In the room, Yi Xian was studying the forging technique that Yun Sheng had passed on to him. Currently he was already slightly engrossed in it. According to Yun Sheng, the Tao of forging was broad and profound. If it was mastered to the extreme, the treasures created could destroy the heavens and the earth. Just like those treasures on the interstellar bounty list. According to what Yun Sheng had said, some of these treasures were man-made. This caused Yi Xian to be even more curious about the origins of the prison pagoda. Was this prison pagoda man-made as well? Unfortunately, neither the gods on the second floor nor the fourth floor could answer his question. Even they didn't know which era this pagoda was from. No matter what, the Tao of forging had endless potential and infinite possibilities. A moment later, Yi Xian entered the prison pagoda. Inside the pagoda, Xiao Linger was sleeping soundly while hugging a spiritual fruit. On the first floor there were spiritual fruits everywhere. The only fun that Xiao Linger had now was planting spiritual fruits or strolling around from time to time. Next to Xiao Linger, there was a small dream word. Dream Tao Law. Looking at this Dream Tao Law, Yi Xian fell silent. Dream Sword. This was a Tao Law sword that he had always wanted to condense. Previously, he didn't dare to try it because this Tao Law was too terrifying and he didn't have the ability to control it. Now he had reached the void-piercing realm. Therefore he wanted to give it a try. However, this still required the cooperation of the Dream Tao Law. Because if the other party didn't cooperate, then it would be absolutely impossible for him to succeed. In order to cooperate with the Dream Tao Law, he had to communicate with the other party. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he walked over to the Dream Tao Law and grinned. Let's have a chat. The Dream Tao didn't respond. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, What are your conditions? Tell me. The Tao Law still didn't respond. Yi Xian was about to speak when the voice of the god on the second floor resounded again. Don't waste your energy. It doesn't take a liking to you at all. Not to mention it, even the Tao Law and Spatial Tao Law won't take a liking to you at all. Yi Xian's face darkened. I'm not that bad, right? The god on the second floor said indifferently, Don't doubt it. You are very weak now. Yi Xian grunted coldly. God on the second floor, were you as formidable as I am when you were as young as I am now? The god on the second floor fell silent. Yi Xian sneered. No? At this moment, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded. When I was as old as you, I was already invincible in my world. Now, you aren't even comparable to the guy locked up in the first floor. If he didn't comprehend a trace of the true meaning of Sword Tao, he wouldn't even be qualified to be locked up in the first floor. True meaning of Sword Tao? Yi Xian frowned. What's that? The god on the second floor said indifferently, If you comprehend the true meaning of Sword Tao, you will be considered to have broken through to the level of Sword Immortal. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, How do I comprehend it? The god on the second floor said angrily, Who should I ask? I'm not a swordsman. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment there was a knock on the door. Yi Xian had left the prison pagoda. Yi Xian opened the door. It was Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu smiled. We're here. Yi Xian nodded. Let's go. With that, he and Xiao Gu came to the deck of the Nebula warship. On the deck, Yi Xian looked up. Below there was an endless mountain range. Between these mountains there was a white fog. At a glance it was like a fairyland. Yi Xian said softly, It's so quiet. Beside Yi Xian, Xiao Gu said in a low voice, It's very quiet. This place is a bit strange. We have to be careful. Yi Xian nodded. He glanced around and finally he looked to the right. Dozens of miles away there was a mountain. The mountain was a bit strange. It was like a circular palace. It was very strange. Xiao Gu also looked at the mountain. This mountain is a bit strange. Let's go take a look? Yi Xian nodded slightly. Let's go. With that, he, Xiao Gu, and the others got off the Nebula warship and went straight to the mountain. In next to no time they arrived at the foot of the mountain. At this moment they discovered that the mountain was floating. It was over 30 meters above the ground. Not only that, there were some stone pillars around the bottom of the mountain. The stone pillars were painted with all sorts of mysterious runes. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "There must have been people staying here in the past." At this point he looked at Xiaogu. "There used to be no small world in this area, right?" Xiaogu shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that this place suddenly appeared." At the side Ming Kuan said in a low voice, "It's a bit strange." At this moment an inner court student suddenly pointed not far away. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a closed door on the mountain wall not far away. They could enter. Everyone came to the door. It was very large and there were two ferocious beasts painted on both sides of the door. Yi Xian pointed at the two beasts. "Does anyone recognize them?" Xiaogu shook his head. "I haven't seen them before." Everyone looked at Ming Kuan. Because Ming Kuan had been to the heaven domain, he could be said to be very knowledgeable. Ming Kuan stared at the two beasts for a long time and then shook his head. "I haven't seen them before." Xiaogu looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, do you want to go in?" Yi Xian said calmly, "We're already here. Do we still want to leave?" At this point he paused slightly. "Wait." As he said this, his mind sank into his body. "Second floor guru, is there danger inside?" Second floor guru said calmly, "I don't know." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "How can you not know? You're so powerful. Get lost." Second floor guru suddenly flew into a rage. Yi Xian. After a while Yi Xian asked again, "Shaoling is it dangerous inside?" "Oh. Are you sure?" Are you sure or not?" "I'm not very sure either." Yi Xian. Chapter 384. On the spot Yi Xian's face darkened. The Shaoling was too unreliable. Yi Xian still wanted to ask, but the god on the second floor suddenly said, "Won't you know if it's dangerous if you go in yourself?" "What do you want to ask?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly, "I just want to be safe." The god on the second floor said, "You're afraid of death." Yi Xian smiled, "Who isn't afraid of death?" As he spoke he looked at the door in front of him. He thought for a moment and said, "Xiaogu, brother Ming Kuan and I will go in. The rest of you stay outside and wait for our news." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Some of them wanted to say something but Yi Xian said, "It's decided." Just like that he walked to the door and gave it a light push. Creak. The door was easily opened. It was dark inside the door. Yi Xian, Ming Kuan and Xiaogu walked in. After entering, a cold and gloomy aura hit them in the face. The surroundings were dark and quiet. Yi Xian glanced around. At this moment they should be in a passage. "Brother Yi," Ming Kuan suddenly said, "this place is not simple. We need to be careful." Yi Xian nodded. He didn't dare to be careless in this unfamiliar place. "Brother Yi, look." At this moment Xiaogu suddenly pointed at the wall beside them. "Look." Yi Xian and Ming Kuan looked at the wall. On the wall there were murals. On the murals there were some beasts and some people. However, these people were tall and big, somewhat different from ordinary people. "Huh." At this moment, a surprised voice suddenly came from the prison pagoda. It was the voice of the mysterious woman on the fourth floor. Yi Xian quickly asked, "Vicious Jian, oh no, Senior Jian, do you know what this is?" "Yes." The mysterious woman on the fourth floor said. Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" The mysterious woman on the fourth floor said, "I'm not telling you." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian didn't ask any more questions, he just brought Ming Kuan and Xiaogu forward. On the way, the mysterious woman on the fourth floor suddenly said, "This is a good place. You have to enjoy yourself." Yi Xian said calmly, "Are you trying to scare me?" Jian Zizai laughed and said, "You are so bold. Who would dare to scare you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "Jane, you're vicious. Your objective should be to come out and I'm not against you coming out. Why do you want to kill me over and over again? Why not?" Jian Zizai said calmly, "After being locked up for so long, don't you need to take revenge?" Yi Xian said angrily, "I'm not the one who locked you up. Why are you looking for me for revenge?" Jian Zizai said, "You are the tower master." Yi Xian said, "It's not that I'm locking you up. You have to find the person who locked you up." Jian Zizai said calmly, "You are the tower master." Yi Xian was so angry that he was speechless. Damn it, this woman is determined to cause trouble for me. Ignoring the woman, he continued to lead Xiaogu and the others down. The deeper they went, the colder the surroundings became. The mountain walls around them were all covered with all kinds of murals. The three of them were also extremely vigilant, not daring to have the slightest bit of carelessness or contempt. About an hour later the three of them stopped. Not far in front of them there was a stone door. On both sides of the stone door stood two stone statues holding spears. Yi Xian walked to the stone door. There were some strange words on the stone door. He had never seen these words before. "Do you know what's written on it?" Jian Zizai suddenly asked. Yi Xian said calmly, "If you have something to fart about, hurry up and say it." Jian Zizai said with a smile, "It's written on it, trespassers will die. Do you still want to go in?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "You don't seem to want me to go in." Jian Zizai fell silent. Yi Xian placed his right hand on the stone door and gently pushed it. The door swung open, and when she saw what was inside, "This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page." At this time the expressions of Yi Xian and the others suddenly became serious. Inside the door there were many long coffins. These coffins were all made of unknown gold and iron. There were more than 30 coffins and each coffin had a lamp on it. "This is..." Xiaogu, who was beside Yi Xian, frowned. "All of them are coffins?" At this time Ming Kuan suddenly pointed not far away. "Look." Hearing the voice, Yi Xian and Lin Sanji looked over. Not far away from them there was a person sitting. This person was different from the average human. He was at least one generation older than the average human. His ears were big, his arms were thick, and his entire body was covered in those strange tattoos. Ming Kuan said in a deep voice, "What exactly are these?" Xiaogu shook his head. "I don't know." At this time the stone door behind the three of them suddenly closed. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the three of them changed greatly. In the distance, the person sitting on the chair suddenly raised his head and opened his eyes. His eyes were brown. He stared straight at Yi Xian and the others and said something that Yi Xian and the others could not understand at all. At this time Jian Zizai suddenly said, he said, "Those who enter will die. You will all die." Yi Xian was speechless. Not far away the person sitting on the chair suddenly stood up. The next moment, a powerful aura suddenly swept toward Yi Xian and the others. How terrifying. The expressions of Yi Xian and the others changed greatly. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. Boom. The stone door directly collapsed. "Run!" Yi Xian and the others flew out. At this time, a giant hand suddenly grabbed them from behind at an extremely fast speed. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Xiaogu and Ming Kuan also stopped. Yi Xian suddenly said, "You guys go first." As he said this, he turned around and a sheathed sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The next moment Yi Xian suddenly pulled out his sword and slashed. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out. At the same time the giant hand was blocked by Yi Xian's sword. Xiaogu and Ming Kuan did not leave. The two of them stood beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You guys go first." Xiaogu smiled bitterly. "Leaving like this is too disloyal." Ming Kuan nodded. "You can't be so disloyal." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but at this time the person on the chair appeared in front of them. The next moment, a huge fist directly blasted toward them. The expressions of the three of them changed greatly. The next moment the three of them attacked together. Boom! With the sound of an explosion the three of them flew out and smashed heavily against the wall. On the ground Yi Xian quickly stood up. At this moment his head was extremely heavy, and his consciousness was slightly blurred. On the other hand Xiaogu and Ming Kuan directly fainted. So strong. Yi Xian knew that the mysterious person in front of him was not someone he could resist at this moment. At this moment, Jian Zizai's voice sounded again. "Quickly activate this pagoda. Activate this pagoda and we can definitely defeat him. Activate the prison pagoda." Yi Xian's expression darkened. So this is what this woman is planning. At this moment the person in the distance was about to attack again. Yi Xian's expression changed. The next moment he opened his palm and a sword appeared in front of him. The moment this sword appeared, a powerful sword force instantly appeared in the field. The sword at the top of the pagoda. When he saw this sword the person in the distance stopped. He looked at the sword in front of Yi Xian with a solemn and fearful gaze. After a moment he turned around and left. Yi Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Jian Zizai's voice suddenly sounded from within the pagoda. "Idiot! Such stupidity, no wonder your clan was exterminated. Idiot! Idiot!" Yi Xian ignored Jian Zizai, who was already a little crazy, and hurriedly left the passage with Xiaogu and Ming Kuan. Outside. When Yi Xian brought the two of them out, he found that the people from the Xiu sect were confronting a group of people. There were also a dozen people on the other side. Yi Xian put Xiaogu and Ming Kuan on the ground, then looked at Li Chuan, who was not far away. What's going on? This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. What's going on? Li Chuan said solemnly, these people are from the Ascendant Heaven sect. Ascendant Heaven sect. Yi Xian frowned. Among the experts who wanted to snatch the pagoda outside Dao Yi City last time was the Ascendant Heaven sect leader Mo Yanxiao. At this moment Li Chuan said again, they want to go in. Yi Xian smiled. It's fine, it's not like it's ours. Whoever wants to go in can go in. Li Chuan glanced at Yi Xian. We'll listen to Brother Yi. As he spoke, he retreated to the side. Yi Xian said, let's retreat first. Although he was curious about the inside of the mountain, he knew very well that with his current strength, if he went in again, it would be tantamount to suicide. Therefore he decided to retreat first. At this moment, an Ascendant Heaven sect disciple suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian and asked, what's inside? Yi Xian smiled. Your attitude is not good, I'm not telling you. Hearing this, the man's eyes narrowed slightly. In the next moment he suddenly slammed his palm towards Yi Xian. As this palm slammed out, a stream of water seemed to have decided to drown Yi Xian. Yi Xian was already prepared. The moment the man made his move, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! In front of everyone's eyes, the man who had attacked was directly sent flying. He was sent flying thousands of feet. Everyone here was stunned. Yi Xian walked over to the man with his sword in hand. At this moment the man was lying on the ground. His entire body was covered in cracks, and blood was flowing incessantly from his mouth. Yi Xian pointed his sword at the man. Who gave you the courage to attack? The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. If you want to kill me, then kill me. If you want to. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword suddenly stabbed downwards. The center of the man's forehead was pierced through by Yi Xian's sword. The disciples of the Ascendant Heaven sect were infuriated when they witnessed this scene, and they charged at Yi Xian. On the other hand, Li Chuan and the others who stood behind Yi Xian charged towards the disciples of the Ascendant Heaven sect as well. In an instant, both sides entered into battle. Yi Xian was just about to attack when a voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. If I were you, I would run immediately. It was the voice of a god from the second floor. Yi Xian was just about to ask when Jian Zizai suddenly said, why run? There's no need to run. Everything will be fine. As if I'd believe you. Yi Xian cursed, and then he turned to look at Li Chuan and the others who were nearby. Stop fighting and run. Li Chuan was stunned, and then he said, Brother Yi, we can win. Yi Xian said, stop fighting. Hurry up and run. Get out of here. When he saw that Yi Xian didn't seem to be lying, Li Chuan hesitated for a moment, and then he hurriedly looked at the students from the Xiao school. Everyone run. Run quickly. Everyone was stunned when they heard Li Chuan, but they didn't think too much about it and hurriedly ran with Li Chuan. The disciples of the Ascendant Heaven sect were stunned when they saw Yi Xian and the others flee. They were terrified just like that. Yi Xian led everyone back to the nebula ship. He started the nebula ship immediately. The nebula ship was about to leave. However, at this moment, the stone gate of the mountain in the distance suddenly opened. At the same time, a man walked out. It was the person who had attacked the three of them in the passageway. After that person came out, he waved his right hand, and all the disciples of the Ascendant Heaven sect not far away were directly turned into ashes. Then the person raised his head and looked at the nebula warship, or more accurately, at Yi Xian. The other party was looking at him. At this moment, the person raised his right hand and aimed at the nebula warship. Sensing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly jumped off the nebula warship, and the person's hand lowered and aimed at him. Yi Xian raised his hands. I surrender. In the distance, the person was stunned, and the next moment he lowered his right hand. P.S. If you sell a kidney, will it have a big impact? End of this chapter. Chapter 385. Surrender? Jian Zizai's voice suddenly sounded from within the prison pagoda. Yi Xian, are you still a man? Shut the hell up. Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, Jian is so vicious. Do you believe that I won't kill you first? Jian Zizai sneered. Come on, come to the fourth floor. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. Damn, this woman was really difficult to deal with. Because he was sure that he couldn't beat this woman right now. He didn't pay attention to this woman because the person in front of the stone door in the distance was walking towards him. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Guru on the second floor, do you know the origin of this person? The guru on the second floor said indifferently, I don't know. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. At this moment, the person had already walked in front of him. The person spread out his right hand, and a huge picture appeared in front of Yi Xian. On the picture was a woman in a plain dress, and she held a sword in her right hand. Seeing this woman, Yi Xian was stunned. Because this woman was the mysterious woman in the plain dress. In front of Yi Xian, the person pointed at Yi Xian and suddenly said, "Human, is that the sword in your hand?" He was speaking human language. Yi Xian was a little hesitant because he wasn't sure what the relationship between the woman in the plain dress and the person in the plain dress was. Earlier, Jian Zizai had said that the person's clan had been exterminated. If this was done by the woman in the plain dress, then admitting it would be equivalent to courting death. At this moment, the person suddenly took a step forward. "Answer me." His voice was deafening like a great bell. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Yes." He knew that he couldn't be complacent because the sword he had just taken out was the sword of the woman in the plain dress. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the person put away the picture and said, "Come with me." After saying that, he turned around and left. Hearing this, Yi Xian immediately felt relieved. It seemed that this mysterious clan was not destroyed by the woman in the plain dress. Otherwise he would really be doomed. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and followed the tall man into the stone door once again. Soon, the two of them arrived at the hall with dozens of coffins. The tall man sat on a chair and looked down at Yi Xian. "What's your relationship with her?" Yi Xian replied solemnly, "I'm a swordsman, she taught me sword Dao." The tall man stared at Yi Xian for a long time. Finally, his expression softened. "Where is she now?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know either." As he spoke, he faced the tall man. "Senior, do you know her?" The tall man faintly nodded. "I do. Back then, when our clan was in great danger, it was her appearance that allowed our clan to retain a trace of its lineage. Without her, our clan would have completely disappeared from this world." Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little curious. "She saved your clan?" In his impression, the woman in the plain dress didn't seem like someone who liked to do good deeds. Of course, the woman in the plain dress was very, very good to him. The tall man glanced at Yi Xian. "Why are you here?" Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "This miniature world just happened to appear here, so my friend and I wanted to take a look." The tall man frowned. "Where is this place?" Yi Xian was slightly astounded. "Senior, you don't know where this place is?" The tall man shook his head. "I was in a deep slumber before this, and it was your arrival that woke me up." Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "Senior, you weren't here before this?" The tall man frowned. He raised his head and glanced at the surroundings. After a short while, his frown deepened. "So, the formation has disappeared." "The formation has disappeared?" Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "Senior, can you explain it a little more clearly?" The tall man glanced at Yi Xian. "In order to protect ourselves, my clan utilized a grand formation to conceal this entire world, and then it drifted through the boundless starry sky. Now it should have drifted to your starry sky. Now that the formation has shattered, it should have alarmed the experts of your starry sky." Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "Senior, what do you plan to do next?" The tall man fell silent for a moment before he said, "Now that the grand formation is gone, it'll be very dangerous for us to continue drifting about." Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "Senior, if you intend to stay in this starry sky, then you'll probably encounter a great deal of trouble." Presently, practically all the powers of the Northern Territory had their eyes on this miniature world. So, it could be said that the tall man would definitely encounter a great deal of trouble if he wanted to stay here. The tall man spoke indifferently. "It's fine. I'll just have to kill some people and gain a foothold again." Yi Xian was speechless. The tall man spoke abruptly. "This world used to be the territory of my clan. There used to be a sect in the north, and it was the swordsman sect. She came here all those years ago with the purpose of going to that sect. Now that sect has been destroyed. However, you can go and have a look. Perhaps you'll be pleasantly surprised." "The north?" Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Thank you." The tall man nodded. "There are some outsiders in this world and some of them aren't weak. I need to recuperate for now, so I can't fight too much. You have to be careful. You can come here if you encounter any danger." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Thank you. Take care, senior." With that, he left. In the hall, the tall man took out the portrait of the woman in a plain dress once more, and he fell into deep thought as he gazed at the woman in the portrait. All those years ago, it was this woman who had saved his clan with a casual slash of her sword. It was just a casual slash of her sword. After Yi Xian left the belly of the mountain, he headed straight north. He was naturally curious about the place where the woman in a plain dress had once been. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian sank his mind into his body and sneered. Vicious Jian, I've turned danger into safety again. Are you angry? Jian Zizai did not answer. Yi Xian continued, Vicious Jian, you'll suffer retribution in the future for being so bad. Jian Zizai suddenly said, Come in and hit me if you have the ability. Come in. Yi Xian smiled coldly. I'm not going in. Jian Zizai said calmly, I don't believe that the Great Path's luck will always be with you. Yi Xian chuckled. My luck is good. I'm going to piss you off. The current him was very unhappy with Jian Zizai. This woman was always trying to harm him. He really couldn't beat her. Otherwise he would definitely go in and beat this guy to death. Jian Zizai did not speak to Yi Xian anymore because she realized that this person was despicable. She could not gain any advantage verbally. Yi Xian did not continue to tangle with Jian Zizai. He sped up. Along the way he saw some abandoned ruins. Obviously this small world did not only have the tall man's clan, but also some other creatures. Unfortunately it seemed that they were all gone. Just like that, after about an hour Yi Xian stopped. A few 100 feet in front of him, there was a giant sword floating in the air. The sword was at least 100 feet long and was floating upside down. Below the sword was a huge round platform, and on top of the round platform was a pile of ruins. Obviously this should be the swordsman sect that the tall man had mentioned. Yi Xian walked over. Along the way he saw some bones. It seemed that they had been dead for a long time. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived in front of a mountain gate. One side of the gate had collapsed. Among the collapsed rubble Yi Xian saw a plaque. On the plaque there were 2 words engraved, Sword Sect. Sword Sect? Yi Xian was silent for a moment before he continued forward. On both sides of him there were many bones. These bones were still holding swords in their hands. Obviously they had been fighting before they died. There must have been a fierce battle here. Yi Xian scanned the surroundings. Suddenly he walked quickly to a piece of broken rock. Beside the rock there was a corpse. This corpse was not a human corpse. It seemed to belong to some kind of demon beast. It was shaped like an insect and its body was somewhat large. It was also emitting a strange aura. Yi Xian was about to walk closer to take a closer look when the voice of the great god on the second floor suddenly sounded. Do you want to die? Yi Xian was slightly surprised. Why do you say that? The great god on the second floor said in a deep voice, that is emitting a poisonous aura. If you breathe it in, even if you don't die, you won't be able to keep your body. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. It can't be that scary, right? The great god on the second floor sneered. Not that scary? If it weren't for the chaos chi in your body, you would have died before you even got close to this place. Speaking of this, the great god on the second floor paused for a moment before continuing. This strange creature is a bit strange. It doesn't look like an ordinary demon beast. This sect should have been destroyed by these strange creatures. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. You haven't seen it, great god on the second floor? The great god on the second floor said, No. But the guy on the 4th floor should have seen it. What? Yi Xian was puzzled. Because she is a bit special. The great god on the second floor said, If you can build a good relationship with her, there will be endless benefits. Yi Xian said indifferently, You saw it too. It's not that I want to be enemies with her, but she tried to kill me time and time again. Build a good relationship with her? Anyway, I don't have any hope. The great god on the second floor said, That's your business. I'm just giving a suggestion. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, How is she special? The great god on the second floor said, You will know in the future. It's meaningless to tell you now. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. He had said nothing for so long. Yi Xian looked at the strange demon beast in front of him. The body of the demon beast was still exuding that strange aura. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, Great god on the second floor, can I collect this aura? The great god on the second floor said, You don't have anything to hold it. If there are more of these things, they can even destroy this world. What do you use to store them? Yi Xian said, Can I use the prison pagoda? No. The great god on the second floor said in a deep voice, Xiao Linger is on the 1st floor. She can't resist this thing. At this point she paused and said, The 3rd floor? Yi Xian nodded. The great god on the second floor was silent for a moment and then said, You can try, but first use the chaotic energy to protect yourself. Yi Xian nodded and then urged the chaotic energy. Then he carefully put the strange demon beast's body into the 3rd floor of the prison pagoda. This thing might be of great use in the future. Yi Xian continued to move forward. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, he suddenly froze and stopped. Not far in front of him, there was a statue of a man. The man held a sword and looked forward. On his shoulder was a little guy leaning on his head. Chapter 386. Seeing this statue, Yi Xian was stunned. Because this statue was exactly the same as the person who taught him the sword drawing technique. Could it be that this person was the one who founded the sword sect? Yi Xian walked up to the statue. Below the statue there was a line of words. Unfortunately, it was already blurred and he couldn't make out what was written. At this time, Xiaolinger suddenly flew out. Yi Xian looked at Xiaolinger, but Xiaolinger raised her head to look at the little fellow on the statue's shoulder. Looking at the little fellow, Xiaolinger's eyes were filled with curiosity. "What's wrong?" Yi Xian asked softly. Xiaolinger looked at the little fellow for a long time. Finally, she grinned and turned around to return to the prison pagoda. Yi Xian was about to leave when the sword at the top of the pagoda suddenly trembled. Yi Xian stopped and looked at the statue in front of him. He knew that the owner of this statue was the owner of the sword in the pagoda. Yi Xian was suddenly curious. He was curious about the owner of the other sword because he had seen the owners of the sword in the middle and the rightmost swords. What kind of person was the owner of the leftmost sword? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian turned around and left. These people were all peerless swordsmen. Their strength was beyond his scope of understanding. What he should be thinking about now was how to become stronger. Yi Xian continued walking. Along the way there were corpses everywhere. Soon he came to a dilapidated hall. The hall was covered in a thick layer of dust, and there was an unpleasant moldy smell everywhere. At the front of the hall was a statue that looked exactly like the one outside. But this statue was clean and without a speck of dust. Yi Xian walked in front of the statue. At this time he suddenly turned his head. On his right, a hunchbacked old man was looking at him. There was a living person. Yi Xian was shocked, and his left hand gripped his sword tightly. The hunchbacked old man glanced at Yi Xian, then walked up to the statue. He bowed deeply, then took out a piece of cloth and started wiping the statue. Yi Xian said softly, "Senior?" The hunchbacked old man asked, "Are you a swordsman?" Yi Xian nodded. The hunchbacked elder stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. "It's been many years since anyone came here." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, what exactly happened here?" The hunchbacked old man said softly, "Haven't you already seen the results?" Yi Xian looked at the statue. He was so powerful, so why did his sect end up like this? "I hope." The hunchbacked old man suddenly sneered, "If he was here, would my sect have fallen to such a state?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "What do you mean?" The hunchbacked old man said softly, "I don't know where he went." Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. The owner of this statue should have left this world a long time ago. That's right, if he was still here, this sect wouldn't have fallen to such a state. The hunchbacked old man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Young man, what are you here for?" Yi Xian said, "To search for treasures." The hunchbacked old man was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so direct. He looked at Yi Xian and then fell silent. Yi Xian said, "Since senior is still here, then this junior will take his leave." Saying so, he turned and left. If there was no one here, he would have looked around to see if there were any treasures. But since someone was here, he could only give up. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave, the hunchbacked old man suddenly said, "Wait. Yi Xian, this chapter is not finished, please flip the page." He stopped and turned to look at the hunchbacked old man. The hunchbacked old man fell silent for a moment. In the next moment he suddenly pointed with a finger, and a ray of sword light slashed towards Yi Xian. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he didn't think too much about it. He drew his sword and slashed. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered. The hunchbacked old man looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. "You drew your sword just now. How do you know this sword technique?" Yi Xian said, "A senior taught it to me." The hunchbacked old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Is it him?" Yi Xian nodded. The hunchbacked old man looked at Yi Xian for a long time. In the end he smiled. "Heaven's will, it really is heaven's will." Yi Xian was speechless. The hunchbacked old man looked at Yi Xian. "Follow me." Saying so, he turned and walked out. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and followed him. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive in front of a small river. The water was clear and there were countless fist-sized pebbles at the bottom of the river. Yi Xian looked at the hunchbacked old man with a puzzled expression. The latter spoke softly. "The river of sword intent is the place where the experts of my sword sect have comprehended. The sword intent of my sword sex experts is gathered in the river. When he spoke up to this point he looked at Yi Xian. Do you understand? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Thank you, senior. At this point he paused for a moment and asked, why? The hunchbacked old man said with a smile, since he passed down that sword skill to you, it proves that you're fated with my sword sect. Now the sword sect of our world has already declined. If no one inherits these things then they'll really disappear completely. You have the right to inherit it. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, no matter what, I thank you. The hunchbacked old man grinned and left. Yi Xian walked over to the river and sat down cross-legged. It didn't take long for two types of sword intent to appear around him. Good and evil sword intent. As soon as they appeared, the river suddenly seethed. At the same time, countless sword intents surged towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned. What are they trying to do? Right at this moment, Yi Xian was shocked because he noticed that the sword intents in the river were actually trying to devour his sword intent. Hostility. As soon as his sword intent appeared, the sword intents in the river clearly felt threatened. Yi Xian was about to withdraw his sword intent, but his evil sword intent suddenly charged towards the river. It didn't take long for the evil sword intent to devour the sword intents in a frenzy. At the same time, the sword intents in the river were retaliating madly. They were fighting each other. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Soon Yi Xian realized that the evil sword intent couldn't hold on any longer. There were too many sword intents in the tower and they were all very strong. Therefore the evil sword intent was having a hard time resisting. Fortunately these sword intents were ownerless. Otherwise the evil sword intent would probably be defeated in an instant. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed a strand of the good sword intent and said angrily, why aren't you helping? Because from the beginning until now, the good sword intent had been watching from the side and had no intention of helping. This was too disloyal. After being scolded by Yi Xian, the good sword intent hurriedly rushed over to help. After all, Yi Xian was its master and it didn't dare to disobey him. After the good sword intent joined in, the situation gradually changed. However, the good and evil sword intent was still a little difficult because there were too many sword intents in the river. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and quickly said, devour the weaker ones first, starting from the weakest. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. After hearing Yi Xian's words, the good and evil sword intent began to devour the weaker sword intents. Just like that, 2 days passed and the number of sword intents in the river decreased. To Yi Xian's surprise, his 2 sword intents had become stronger after devouring those sword intents. Seeing this, Yi Xian was a little excited. Just like that, about 3 days later, there were only 2 sword intents left in the river. They were Yi Xian's good and evil sword intent. And now, after devouring countless sword intents, Yi Xian discovered that his sword intent was at least several times stronger than before. This discovery made Yi Xian overjoyed. Sword immortals were divided into small sword immortals and great sword immortals. And now he should be a great sword immortal. Now if he used the fairy spirit sword draw to determine life and death, and these 2 sword intents, ordinary origin realm experts wouldn't be able to resist him at all. At this moment, the hunchbacked old man came in front of Yi Xian. The hunchbacked old man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. You should be a great sword immortal now, right? Yi Xian nodded. I should be. The hunchbacked old man said softly, this old man would like to ask for your help, young friend. Yi Xian said, Senior, please tell me. The hunchbacked old man looked around and said softly, young friend, if you meet someone who will teach you sword skills in the future, please tell him that the ones who destroyed the sword sect back then were the Saha tribe. This tribe is in the Saha Star region. Yi Xian nodded. If I meet them, I will definitely tell them this. The hunchbacked old man faintly smiled. During the war back then, all the valuables in the sect were taken away. However, there is still an item in the main hall. This item is called the Sword Courage Stone. It is very useful to you now, so you can take it. With that, his body gradually became illusory. Yi Xian was silent. Actually, he could tell from the beginning that the hunchbacked old man was a soul body, and only a strand of soul body. Strictly speaking, the old man was already dead. Soon, the hunchbacked old man completely disappeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian bowed slightly, then turned around and left. He came to the hall from before, and in the hall, he found the Sword Courage Stone that the hunchbacked old man had mentioned. This Sword Courage Stone is only the size of a palm. It's just right for me. Yi Xian discovered that when he held the Sword Courage Stone, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly surged out of the Sword Courage Stone and gathered on his arm. This sword intent was no weaker than his good and evil sword intent. Good stuff. Yi Xian was a little excited. With this sword courage stone, it meant that his sword skills would be enhanced by 3 sword intense. Fight. Now he just wanted to find someone to fight with. As if he thought of something, he suddenly said, "Vicious Jian, come out, let's fight one-on-one." Jian Zizai said calmly, "Come in." Yi Xian snorted coldly, "Come in then. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" With that, he was about to go in, but at this moment the god on the second floor suddenly appeared in front of him. Then the god on the second floor slapped him on the head. Bang! Yi Xian flew out. Yi Xian was speechless. The god on the second floor looked coldly at Yi Xian, who was on the ground in the distance. "Go in? Are you a pig brain? If you go in, that woman can kill you with just a breath." Yi Xian was a little dissatisfied. "Please, I'm also very strong now, okay?" The god on the second floor said calmly, "Is that so? Then let me see how strong you are." After saying that, she disappeared directly. Yi Xian was a little confused. What did she mean? In the next moment his expression changed greatly, and he suddenly turned around. An instant later he raised his hands. "I surrender." End of this chapter. Chapter 387. In front of Yi Xian was an ugly exotic beast. This exotic beast was exactly the same as the corpse of the exotic beast on the 3rd floor of the prison pagoda. One had to know that even the 2nd floor guru was extremely fearful of the exotic beast that was already a corpse. Now there was a living one in front of him. How could he not be fearful? The exotic beast stared at Yi Xian. Its eyeballs were spinning. It was a very strange sight. However, it did not make a move. Yi Xian slowly retreated. With every step he took, the exotic beast would take a step forward. Yi Xian had no choice but to stop. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What are you going to do?" At this time the exotic beast's gaze suddenly fell on Yi Xian's abdomen. In the next moment, it charged directly at Yi Xian. An extremely strange aura was emitting from its body. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed. He turned and ran. Yi Xian's speed was very fast. However, the exotic beast's speed was not slow either. It kept chasing after Yi Xian. Gradually, Yi Xian realized that if he continued to run like this, the exotic beast would catch up to him sooner or later. Because the exotic beast's speed seemed to be a little faster than his. Yi Xian stopped. He turned and drew his sword and slashed. The sword in his hand was the immortal spirit sword. The sword slashed down. Boom. The exotic beast was instantly sent flying hundreds of feet away. However, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably solemn. Because the exotic beast seemed to be completely fine after taking a blow from his sword. How could it be so terrifying? In the distance, the exotic beast roared at Yi Xian. Then it charged at Yi Xian again. Yi Xian turned and ran. As he ran, Yi Xian hurriedly asked in his heart, "Second floor guru, why is this fellow chasing after me so relentlessly?" Second floor guru said calmly, "Don't you think you're very powerful? Hit him." Yi Xian was speechless. The distance between man and beast was getting shorter and shorter. Yi Xian's face darkened. If this continued, he would be caught sooner or later. He couldn't beat him in a fight, nor could he outrun him. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly changed his direction. To that round mountain. Now, he could only go to the round mountain to look for the tall man, because the other party had said that he could look for him if there was any danger. At this moment, the exotic beast behind him roared as if it had gone mad. At the same time, it sped up a lot. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. He quickly stopped, turned around, drew his sword and slashed down. That strange beast did not dodge and directly crashed into Yi Xian's sword. Boom. The strange beast was instantly sent flying, and Yi Xian himself also retreated rapidly. This time he retreated more than 1,000 feet. After he stopped, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was seriously injured. That blow just now had directly damaged his entire body, including his 5 internal organs. Not only that, but there was also a strange aura that was entangled around his body, constantly eroding him. Fortunately, he had the chaotic chi to resist, or he would have been dead. Yi Xian found that the chaotic chi could only barely resist that strange aura. In the distance, the strange beast was still unharmed. Not only that, but it was even more manic. Soon the strange beast chased after Yi Xian again. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched and he turned to run. At this moment he realized that he really couldn't beat the other party. If he used the prison pagoda, he might be able to give it a try. However, once he used the prison pagoda, it would be even more troublesome because that Jian Zizai in the pagoda would definitely be more troublesome than this guy in front of him. Now, he could only go to that round mountain as soon as possible to find the tall man. Now, he could only go to that round mountain as soon as possible to find the tall man. Yi Xian sped up, and it didn't take long for him to arrive before a dense forest. However, he just arrived before the forest when he suddenly stopped. Because he noticed that the strange beast behind him had stopped first. Yi Xian turned around to look at the strange beast. The strange beast was looking at the forest behind him, and there was fear in its eyes. Fear. Yi Xian's face sank. There's something in the forest behind me. He turned around and glanced at the forest before him. The trees were very large, very long, and they were all crooked and twisted. The entire forest seemed like a ball of string that had been knotted. It was slightly strange. Yi Xian didn't dare advance any further. Since he'd arrived at this minor world, he'd noticed that nothing here was so simple, and he had to be careful. When it saw Yi Xian stop, the strange beast in the distance roared furiously at Yi Xian, and this roar caused the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet to crack apart. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. This guy was really strong. However, the strange beast still didn't dare to approach. Seeing this, Yi Xian walked to the side, preparing to slip away, but the strange beast followed him closely. Yi Xian's face sank. This guy wasn't going to give up. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Second floor guru, is there anything wrong with the forest behind me?" The second floor guru said indifferently, "Won't you know once you go in?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly, "Senior, this place is very strange. I'm afraid I won't be able to come out if I go in." The second floor guru said, "You solve it yourself." After that, the second floor was completely silent. Yi Xian, just like that, the man and the beast were in a stalemate for about an hour. At this time the sky turned dark. There was silence all around. Yi Xian's scalp was a little numb. Originally, he naturally wasn't afraid of the night, but the situation was different now. There was this strange beast in front of him, and there was a strange forest behind him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't panicking. At this time, a subtle sound suddenly came from the forest behind Yi Xian. This sound was similar to the sound of footsteps, like the sound of feet stepping on leaves. Hearing this sound, Yi Xian's face changed, and the strange beast opposite him slowly retreated. Something's up. Yi Xian also retreated, and as he retreated, the strange beast stopped. It stared at Yi Xian, and its body kept wriggling on the ground, causing the whole ground to tremble. Obviously, it wanted to block Yi Xian. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's face sank, and the next moment he directly rushed towards the strange beast. Damn, he couldn't stand this. If he were to die, he had to drag the strange beast down with him. At the moment when Yi Xian suddenly rushed out, the strange beast opposite him suddenly let out a strange cry, then turned around and ran. However, before it could run a few steps, it suddenly fell to the ground. Yi Xian was stunned. "Be careful." At this time, the second floor guru's voice suddenly sounded. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "What's going on?" The second floor guru didn't respond. Yi Xian didn't ask any more. He walked to the strange beast's corpse. At this moment, the strange beast was still alive, and its body was still wriggling. And Yi Xian noticed that there was a wound on the strange beast's throat. Something was making a move on this strange beast. And he saw nothing. Without a doubt, that unknown existence was definitely not something he could fight against. Yi Xian didn't even think about it and directly ran away. And as soon as he took a step, the strange beast's corpse behind him disappeared. At the same time, a blurry black shadow suddenly flashed in front of him, accompanied by a strange laugh. Yi Xian stopped and he glanced around coldly. There was nothing around him. And he knew that the unknown thing was around him. Even that strange beast could be killed in an instant. Obviously, the other party's strength was far beyond his. Facing such an existence, he couldn't use force, he could only use his wits. Yi Xian didn't speak. He waved his right hand and a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. The sword at the top of the tower. When this sword appeared, a powerful sword aura immediately appeared in the surroundings. "Can you change your move?" At this time, Jin Zizai's voice suddenly sounded. "Is it interesting to use this move to scare me?" Yi Xian said coldly, "It's none of your business. Jin Zizai is vicious. Let me tell you, if I die, I will definitely detonate the prison tower before I die and die with you." Jin Zizai sneered, "Detonate this tower? You think too highly of yourself." Yi Xian didn't pay attention to this woman. He looked around and it was very quiet. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then put away the sword, turned around and ran. But soon he found that no matter how he ran, he was still in the same place. Seeing this, Yi Xian's face darkened. The other party was not going to let him go. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Senior, can you come out for a chat?" There was no response. Yi Xian didn't say anything. He sat cross-legged on the ground and waited. The other party didn't kill him from the number 1 family. Obviously, the other party didn't want to kill him yet. Since they didn't want to kill him, the other party must have some purpose. Time passed bit by bit, and just as dawn was about to break, a blurry figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian couldn't see the other party's true appearance at all. The blurry figure suddenly moved, and soon, a woman made of energy appeared in front of Yi Xian. This woman was none other than the woman in the plain dress. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. It was the woman in the plain dress again. Could it be that the woman in the plain dress had some sort of relationship with this guy? The blurry figure suddenly pointed at Yi Xian, and then at the woman in the plain dress. Obviously, it was asking Yi Xian if he knew the woman in the plain dress. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I know her, I'm very familiar with her, very familiar, At this moment, the blurry figure suddenly disappeared. The next moment, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He drew his sword and slashed forward. With this slash, a sword light directly tore through space. A sword strike with all his strength. However, as soon as Yi Xian's sword slashed down, his entire body flew backward. This time, he flew directly back into the dense forest, and finally landed heavily on a tree. At the same time, branches directly wrapped around him. Yi Xian's mind was a little confused. What was going on? At this moment, Jian Zizai's voice suddenly sounded in the prison pagoda. "This time you're finished." Outside the prison pagoda, the blurry figure appeared not far in front of Yi Xian. He moved slightly, and the next moment, a somewhat low voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Where is she?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Why are you looking for her?" A voice that sounded like the roar of a wild beast suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "I'm going to tear her into 1,000 pieces." "It's over." Yi Xian's face turned pale. So this guy had a grudge against the woman in the plain dress. Chapter 388. There's enmity between them. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. He'd thought that he'd be able to get out of this predicament, but he hadn't expected that there was enmity between them. "I'm finished." Meanwhile, the blurry figure suddenly floated over to Yi Xian. Even though it was so close, Yi Xian was still unable to see it clearly. What exactly is it? Yi Xian was quite curious. Meanwhile, a voice resounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Where is she?" The voice had calmed down quite a bit. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "I don't know where she is either." "Why do you possess her sword?" The voice resounded once more. Yi Xian replied, "I obtained it by chance." The mysterious voice spoke coldly, "Let her come." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "She isn't in this starfield right now. Let me go, and I'll ask her to come look for you once she comes looking for me. How about it?" Meanwhile, the branches suddenly shrank, and Yi Xian instantly felt as if his entire body was about to explode. "This fellow is going to attack me." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "You can't defeat the old, so you attack the young? I look down on you." Suddenly the branches stopped. A short moment later, the branches around Yi Xian suddenly vanished, and Yi Xian regained his freedom. Yi Xian was quite puzzled. The mysterious voice said, "I won't bully her juniors. If she comes looking for you in the future, tell her to come look for me here." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "I'll definitely tell her that." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, the mysterious voice spoke abruptly, "Since you're her heir, then why are you so weak?" Yi Xian's face darkened when he heard this. "I'm only around the age of 20 now. Could I possibly defy the heavens at such an age?" The mysterious voice fell silent for a moment, and then it didn't take long for him to appear in front of Yi Xian again. At this moment, Yi Xian saw his appearance clearly. He was very similar to a human, yet there were differences. His ears were very sharp, his body was slender, and his entire body seemed as if it was formed from dark energy. Dark Devil Man. At this time, the voice of the Almighty on the second floor suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. There was a hint of seriousness in his voice. "Dark Devil?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" The god on the second floor said calmly, "An ancient race that was once famous and extremely powerful. However, for some unknown reason they suddenly disappeared without a trace. I didn't expect to meet an ancient demon here." When she spoke up to this point, she paused for a moment before she continued, "This world isn't simple at all. The tall man you encountered in the belly of the mountain was probably from the giant race, and he was once an extremely famous race. Unfortunately, he vanished mysteriously in the end." Yi Xian was about to speak when the Dark Devil Man in front of him suddenly said, "Human, let me ask you something." Is she stronger or am I stronger? Yi Xian was stunned. Asked this question. In his opinion, the dark devil man before him was very strong, very, very strong. However, the woman in the plain dress was even stronger. The mysterious woman's strength was unreasonably strong. Moreover, what he saw was only a clone of the woman in the plain dress. It was hard for him to imagine how strong the woman in the plain dress was. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts. He thought for a moment before he said, I know a little about her, but I don't know much about you. So, I don't know who is stronger. The dark devil man was silent for a moment before he said, Go. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, What happened to this world? This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. How did it end up like this? The dark devil man waved his right hand. Soon a light screen appeared in front of Yi Xian. Inside the light screen was this world. Suddenly there was a sudden change. The sky above this world darkened. Then, a black warship that almost covered the sky appeared in this world. Soon, black shadows flew down from the sky one after another. Strange beasts. These black shadows were the kind of strange beast he had seen before. Soon Yi Xian saw the people of this world begin to fight back. Among them there were swordsmen, giant race and dark devil man. It was horrifying. Because the powerhouses of this world were directly crushed. The strange beasts were extremely ferocious, and they were so strong that the powerhouses of this world felt despair. Just as this world was about to be completely destroyed, a woman in a plain dress suddenly appeared on the black warship. The woman glanced down, and her divine sense swept the surroundings as if she was looking for something. As for the intense battle below, she did not even spare a glance at it. A moment later, the woman withdrew her gaze and slowly closed her eyes. She said softly, Where are you? She had crossed countless galaxies and visited countless worlds just to find that one person. How difficult was it to find a person in the vast galaxies? It had been 30,000 years. A whole 30,000 years. The woman opened her eyes and looked towards the end of the horizon with a slightly dazed look in her eyes. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress seemed so lonely. A moment later, the woman was about to leave. At that moment, a huge strange beast suddenly appeared above her. The strange beast was extremely big, at least 100 times bigger than the one Yi Xian had seen. It simply blotted out the sky. The strange beast looked down at the woman in the plain dress with a trace of fear in its eyes. Woman, you're very powerful. The woman in the plain dress glanced at the strange beast and did not say anything. She continued to float towards the horizon. It had been ignored. The strange beast flew into a rage. It roared furiously at the woman in the plain dress. But right at this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly turned her head. Her gaze was very calm, or it should be said to be indifferent. It was like a human looking at an ant. That gaze made the strange beast very uncomfortable. It roared at the woman in the plain dress and a strange aura swept towards the woman in the plain dress. Wherever the strange aura passed, space was directly wiped out. The woman in the plain dress looked at the strange beast coldly. In the next moment she opened her right hand and an illusory sword suddenly appeared above the strange beast's head. She flipped her right hand and pressed it down. The sword fell. The strange beast in the distance was directly pierced by this sword. At the same time, the sword fell straight down and landed on the black warship. Boom. The black warship suddenly shattered and countless strange beasts died. In the air, the huge strange beast's body became illusory. It looked at the woman in the plain dress blankly. I didn't know you were so strong. After saying that, it directly turned into nothingness. In the air, the woman in the plain dress was about to leave. Suddenly she looked down and frowned. That guy. As soon as she finished speaking, she disappeared. Soon she arrived above the dense forest where Yi Xian was. From the looks of it, she was probably just passing by. However, at this moment, a powerful aura suddenly soared into the sky from within the dense forest. The scene suddenly stopped. Yi Xian looked in front of him. This chapter is not finished, please flip the page. Needless to say, when the woman in the plain dress passed by this forest, something must have happened. In front of Yi Xian, the dark demon said, This is what happened in this world. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. If she comes to find me, I will tell her to come here. Of course, whether she comes or not is up to her. However, I will definitely pass on your message. The dark demon said, All right. Yi Xian nodded and turned to leave. He did not know what happened between the woman in the plain dress and the dark demon race when she passed by here. However, he was sure that the woman in the plain dress would not find trouble with others first. After all, she would not care about ordinary things. No matter what happened, it had nothing to do with him. Yi Xian prepared to leave this world because it was too dangerous. He did not want to continue wandering here. Soon Yi Xian came to the starry sky. At that moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of him. High Firmament Sect leader Mo Yanxiao. Mo Yanxiao looked at Yi Xian. My High Firmament Sect disciples were killed by you? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Mo Yanxiao said coldly, your Dao Yi College students were with my High Firmament Sect disciples. Your Dao Yi College students all walked out alive, but not a single one of my High Firmament Sect disciples did. Yi Xian said indifferently, this has nothing to do with me. Mo Yanxiao's eyes narrowed, his expression unfriendly. At that moment Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Sect leader Mo, your disciples disappeared down there. Do you think that I, Yi Xian, have the ability to kill them all alone? Mo Yanxiao was silent. As far as he was concerned, Yi Xian could not possibly kill all the High Firmament Sect disciples alone. As if thinking of something, he looked at Yi Xian. But you should know how they died. Yi Xian smiled. If Senior wants to know, you can go down and investigate yourself. You will know the answer. I still have things to do and will not accompany you. With that, he rode on his sword and disappeared into the distance. Where he stood, Mo Yanxiao was silent for a moment before flying downwards. Before long, sounds of fighting could be heard from below. Yi Xian returned to Dao Yi City and went to the old blacksmith shop. At this moment, the blacksmith shop that he had repaired was in ruins. Something had happened. Yi Xian's face darkened as he hurriedly contacted Yun Sheng. However, there was no reply. At that moment, Grand Elder suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was about to speak when Grand Elder said solemnly, "Follow me." With that, Grand Elder brought Yi Xian back to Dao Yi College. Within the Dao Yi Hall, all the elders and mentors of Dao Yi College were present. Yi Xian asked solemnly, Grand Elder, did something happen? Grand Elder nodded. Yun Sheng has been taken away by the Yun family. They want us to hand you over to Dao Yi College. Apart from that, the Dugu family from Chanyu Domain has also sent someone over to demand that we hand you over within 3 days. Otherwise they will use force. Dugu family? Yi Xian frowned slightly. What kind of family is this? I've never heard of it. Grand Elder glanced at Yi Xian. Are you sure you've never heard of it? Yi Xian nodded. I'm sure. Grand Elder said solemnly, you are from the Yi family of Qingqing. But where is your mother? Mother? Yi Xian was struck dumb when he had heard that. She was from the Dugu family? Inside the hall, Yi Xian fell silent. End of chapter. Chapter 389. The image of that woman in his mind was becoming more and more blurry. Or rather, he was slowly forgetting about her. It would be a lie to say that he did not hate her. He was only 12 years old when she left. Because of her sudden departure, he and his sister had almost died in the Yi mansion. That was why he had never thought of looking for her all these years. Now, her clansmen were here to look for him. The Grand Elder glanced at Yi Xian. If you don't want to return to the Dugu family, Dao Yi Academy will protect you until the end. If you want to return, we won't stop you. However, the Dugu family might not have good intentions by asking you to return. Yi Xian frowned. Bad intentions? What do you mean, Grand Elder? The Grand Elder said in a low voice, I'm guessing they're after the treasure you have. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, Can I meet them? The Grand Elder nodded. I'll make the arrangements. Yi Xian bowed and left. The Grand Elder sighed in the hall. He's a good seedling indeed. It's a pity that he has a great treasure on him. I'm afraid Dao Yi Academy won't be able to protect him. An old man nodded. Indeed. If he stays in Dao Yi Academy will be doomed. Everyone in the hall fell silent. Since the beginning, many people had come to Dao Yi Academy to look for Yi Xian. Dao Yi Academy had fended off many people for Yi Xian, including the Yun family and the Dugu family. If not for Dao Yi Academy, the two families would have gone to look for Yi Xian. They knew that Dao Yi Academy would not be able to hold out for long. The treasure on the top of the Interstellar Bounty Board was too tempting for many forces. At this moment, the Great Elder stood up and sighed in a low voice, I wonder if the Dean will come back. Everyone in the hall smiled bitterly when they heard this. The director had not been in the academy for a few years. Yi Xian returned to his wooden house. At this moment, Ming Kuan and the others were waiting for him. Ming Kuan and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Yi Xian return safely. Yi Xian smiled and said, Why are you guys here? Ming Kuan said solemnly, Brother Yi, I got news that there are two forces outside who seem to be looking for you. Some of them came with ill intentions. Yi Xian said with a smile, Brother Mingquan is quite well informed. There are indeed some forces looking for me, but it doesn't matter, I can deal with them. Mingquan glanced at Yi Xian. If you need any help, just tell me. At the side, Xiaogu also nodded. If we want to fight, our inner courtyard students have never been afraid of anyone. Yi Xian nodded. If there's a fight, I'll definitely call you guys. Xiaogu laughed, then it settled. Yi Xian nodded and said with a smile, Come. Tonight, we brothers of the Xiu men will have a good gathering. Not long after, the sound of laughter came from inside the house. In the middle of the night, Yi Xian walked out of the wooden house. He sat on the stone steps in front of the wooden house and looked up at the sky. A bright moon hung high in the night sky. Yi Xian sat there quietly. After a while, Mingquan walked out and sat beside Yi Xian. Mingquan looked at Yi Xian. The ones who came looking for you are the Dugu family and the Yun family. Do you know these two families? Yi Xian shook his head. Mingquan said in a deep voice, In the heaven domain there are some powerful families. The Dugu family is one of them. They are extremely powerful and influential. Especially hundreds of years ago, the entire heaven domain, even the Wei Yang Palace had to be wary of them. Over the years, the Dugu family's talents have withered, and there are no particularly outstanding monstrous geniuses. However, their foundation is still there. Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. My Dao Yi Academy can't resist them. Unless the Dao Yi Academy from Ancestor Mu's era could resist them. But now, if they really fight to the death, the Dao Yi Academy has no chance of winning. Yi Xian said softly, What about the Yun family? Mingquan said, The Yun family is a blacksmith family. They have a high status in the heaven domain. Many forces look for them to blacksmith, even the Wei Yang Palace. Although they are not as powerful as the Dugu family, their connections are not something the Dugu family can compare with. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. In other words, I can only die? Mingquan was silent for a while. Then he said, Brother Yi, since these two forces are against you, you must have something extraordinary, right? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. What do you mean by extraordinary? You should have heard that I have a treasure with me. With this treasure, I will be in a lot of trouble for the rest of my life. Mingquan nodded slightly. He looked at Yi Xian and asked, Brother Yi, that treasure is really with you? Yi Xian smiled. What do you think? Mingquan smiled bitterly. Brother Yi has a great fortune. However, with such a treasure, I'm afraid there will be a lot of troubles. When he spoke up to here, he paused slightly and continued. Now, we can only see if the academy is able to withstand the pressure from these two forces. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. The first elder came to the bamboo house when it was daybreak. Yi Xian stood up and said with a smile, Let's go. The first elder nodded, and then he led Yi Xian to a tea house in Daoyi City. In the tea house, Yi Xian saw an old man. The old man was dressed in a luxurious brocade robe and wore a white jade ring on the finger of his right hand. On the white jade ring there were two small words, Dugu. Two black-robed men stood behind the old man. The first elder led Yi Xian to the old man. Meanwhile, the old man's gaze descended onto Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and said, A sword immortal below the age of 20, and his combat strength far surpasses ordinary sword immortals. As expected of the Dugu blood. Yi Xian smiled. I wonder how many sword immortals there are in the Dugu family? The old man said indifferently, There are no sword immortals in the younger generation. Yi Xian's smile grew brighter. Then what does my becoming a sword immortal have to do with the Dugu bloodline? The old man's eyes narrowed when he heard this and his gaze turned cold. The atmosphere here instantly became quite tense. A short while later the old man spoke indifferently, Old man, I didn't come here to argue with you. Hand it over and follow me back to the Dugu family. His tone was indisputable. Yi Xian smiled, What if I refuse? The old man laughed coldly, You can give it a try. Let's see if Dao Yi Academy can protect you. The Grand Elder spoke abruptly, Your Excellency, his natural talent is at the top even in the heaven domain. Why can't the Dugu family accept him? The old man fell silent. Actually, the Dugu family had investigated Yi Xian, and they were quite shocked by Yi Xian's natural talent. It was naturally a good thing for the Dugu family if such a person were to stay in the Dugu family. However, no one in the entire Dugu family dared to keep Yi Xian. This was because Yi Xian's mother was still imprisoned in the infernal hell. Not only that, but because of Yi Xian's mother, the other super family in the heaven domain, the Gu family, was still brooding over it. If the Dugu family accepted Yi Xian, they would definitely offend the Gu family. Moreover, the Dugu family was afraid that once Yi Xian grew up, he would turn against the family. The Dugu family did not want to nurture a tiger. Therefore, the more monstrous Yi Xian was, the more the Dugu family feared him and the more worried they were. The old man recollected his thoughts, glanced at Yi Xian and said calmly, "Hand over that thing and follow me back to the Dugu family, and you might be able to live." Still alive. Hearing this, the head elder frowned. Is there something wrong with the Dugu clan's head? A genius like Yi Xian, if they could keep him in the family and nurture him well, he would definitely become a super expert in the future. However, the Dugu family actually wanted to kill him. In front of the old man, Yi Xian smiled. "Actually, you know very well that if I go back with you, I will die. Or rather, I would rather die than live. Am I right?" The old man looked coldly at Yi Xian. "I understand what you mean." As he spoke, he stood up. "Watch carefully, the Dao Yi Academy will not be able to protect you and your sister." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and he grinned. "What, you're dragging my sister into this?" The old man laughed coldly. "Both of you will not be able to escape." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was a very spiritual sword, and this sword was a combination of life and death with the sword drawing technique. As soon as the sword was drawn, the entire tea house collapsed. Not only the tea house but even the surrounding space cracked. No one had expected Yi Xian to suddenly attack, especially the old man in the brocade robe. Therefore he only reacted when Yi Xian's sword slashed down. At this moment it was already too late. Therefore he could only instinctively wave his right hand, trying to block Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. A silhouette flew out instantly. This time he flew a full 300 meters away. Wherever this silhouette passed by, the houses would collapse layer by layer. This figure was the old man in the brocade robe. Hundreds of feet away, the old man in the brocade robe had just stopped when his physical body cracked. At the same time, the ground beneath his feet also cracked. The old man in the brocade robe glanced at his own soul, and he was extremely shocked. His physical body had been destroyed by a young man with one sword. One sword. The young man had destroyed his physical body with one sword. What kind of monster was this? The old man in the brocade robe looked at Yi Xian in the distance, and his heart churned like waves. It was not just the old man in the brocade robe, but even the Grand Elder was stunned. He knew that Yi Xian was extremely powerful and could even easily defeat Origin Realm experts. However, he had never thought that Yi Xian's strength would increase to such a level in such a short amount of time. After all, the old man in the brocade robe was in existence on the same level as him. However, he had not been able to take on Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian walked towards the old man with his sword in hand. He had a smile on his face, but it was a rather horrifying smile. Gradually, his smile became rather vicious. He pointed his sword at the old man in the brocade robe. "What Dugu family? How dare you set your sights on my sister? I'll tell you right now, I will not let you live under the same sky as me." With that, he disappeared on the spot. To Yi Xian, his sister would always be his reverse scale. Whoever touched her would die. Chapter 390. The old man, who was already a soul, stared at Yi Xian with a ferocious look. "Yi Xian, you are courting death. You." As he spoke, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, was already charging towards him. The old man's expression changed, but he quickly calmed down. At the same time, he waved his hands and a powerful soul force swept towards Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian thrust his sword out. The soul force disappeared as soon as the sword stabbed out. At the same time, the sword easily pierced the old man's forehead. A single stab. Yi Xian's stab could be said to be a natural counter to all kinds of souls. The whole place fell silent. The brocade-robed elder's soul was dissipating at an extremely fast speed. He looked at Yi Xian in horror. "How could you be so strong?" Yi Xian did not answer the old man. He turned to look at the other two black-robed men. Their expressions changed and they turned to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian disappeared from where he was. 15 minutes later. The two black-robed men were lying on the ground. The great elder glanced at Yi Xian but did not say a word. Yi Xian said softly, "Great elder, I want to leave Dao Yi Academy." The great elder said solemnly, "We can hold on." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "There's no need to drag the entire Dao Yi Academy down for me. Moreover, I have a powerful treasure with me. Not only the Dugu family but many others will come after me. As long as I'm here, Dao Yi Academy will never have peace." The great elder fell silent. As Yi Xian had said, as long as Yi Xian was around, Dao Yi Academy would never have peace. If it had been Mu Dao Yi's era, Dao Yi Academy might have been able to protect Yi Xian. But now, in all fairness, Dao Yi Academy couldn't protect Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, "Grand Elder, my younger sister?" The Great Elder said solemnly, "She's with the Dean and we don't know where they are." Yi Xian nodded. "After I leave Dao Yi Academy, I'll attract the attention of the Dugu family. They won't come looking for trouble." As he spoke, he bowed slightly to the Great Elder. "I am indebted to the Academy for taking care of me during this period of time. Yi Xian thanks you. Grand Elder, we'll meet again someday." With that, he turned around and left. "Where are you going?" the first elder suddenly asked. Yi Xian stopped. "Great Elder, did the Yun family bring Senior Yun Sheng back to the Heaven region?" Yun Sheng shook his head. "No. They're still in Dao Yi City. They want us to hand you over to Dao Yi Academy." Yi Xian nodded. "When you return, Great Elder, you can announce to the public that I, Yi Xian, am no longer a student of Dao Yi Academy." With that, he disappeared into the horizon. Where he was, the Grand Elder sighed in a low voice. In fact, he wanted Yi Xian to stay. Because the strength Yi Xian had displayed was too terrifying. It was so terrifying that it made his heart palpitate. A genius like this might bring Dao Yi Academy back to its former glory, but he knew very well that Dao Yi Academy would be destroyed before that day came. A moment later, the Great Elder shook his head with a sigh and left. After Yi Xian left Dao Yi Academy, he went to Dao Yi City. Yi Xian walked into a restaurant. As soon as he arrived in front of the restaurant, an old man appeared in front of him. On the left side of the old man's chest was a small Yun character. The Yun family. The old man looked at, "This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page." He glanced at Yi Xian and sneered. "Someone like you is worthy of inheriting the Yun family's blacksmithing skills?" Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Slash. Without any warning, the old man's head flew off his neck. It was an instant kill. Yi Xian walked into the restaurant. In the restaurant he saw Yun Sheng. Yun Sheng's entire body was bound by unknown black iron chains. His face was pale and his breath was very weak. Yun Sheng glanced at Yi Xian. Yi Xian slashed out with his sword, and the iron chains were immediately shattered. Yi Xian walked up to Yun Sheng and said softly, "Master, let's go." Then he carried Yun Sheng on his back and walked out of the restaurant. Outside the restaurant, a middle-aged man blocked his way. Yun Sheng suddenly said, "Yun Long, one of the Yun family's 4 protectors." The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and shook his head. "Cousin, you have poor taste. How can you take a fancy to someone without a blacksmithing bone?" Yun Sheng was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward and slashed with his sword. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and waved his right hand. A long saber slashed out. Boom! With a loud explosion, the middle-aged man retreated several dozen feet. As soon as the middle-aged man stopped, a sword suddenly flashed in front of him. The middle-aged man's eyelids twitched and he instinctively dodged to the side. However, he was still too slow. Slash! The middle-aged man's right arm flew off. Several dozen feet away, the middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian with a grave expression. At this moment, there was no longer any contempt in his eyes. Yi Xian was about to continue when Yun Sheng suddenly said, "Let's leave this place first." Yi Xian nodded and disappeared with Yun Sheng. Yun Long hesitated for a moment but did not choose to chase after them. A moment later he took out a sound-transmitting talisman and crushed it, outside the city. Yun Sheng asked Yi Xian to stop. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Master, are you all right?" Yun Sheng shook his head and sighed. "I was the 3rd son of the previous Yun family patriarch. In the family I was the most talented and accomplished. Naturally, I should have been the Yun family patriarch. Unfortunately, I was only obsessed with blacksmithing and was not good at politics. In the end, the Yun family fell into the hands of my eldest brother." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know why they refused to let me go?" Yi Xian said, "To cut the weeds and eliminate the roots." Yun Sheng chuckled. "That is only one of the reasons. The real reason is that he wanted the Yun family's heirloom, the Furnace of Fortune and the Divine Armament Map. The Furnace of Fortune was obtained by the ancestors of the Yun family. Anything made by this furnace must be of the highest quality. The reason why the Yun family could have such a high position in the heaven domain is because of this furnace." As he spoke, he paused and continued, "As for the Divine Armament Map, it records the whereabouts of 3 weapons. Only the Patriarch can control them." Yi Xian asked, "What divine armament?" Yun Sheng suddenly said, Lend me your sword. Yi Xian was taken aback. Very quickly he passed the fairy spirit sword to Yun Sheng. Yun Sheng tapped the fairy spirit sword lightly with his fingers. The fairy spirit sword trembled slightly. Immediately after, the body of the sword split open and a drawing floated out. Yi Xian, Yun Sheng said softly, these three divine armaments are the earth god's seal, the heaven-shaking axe. As he spoke he stopped. Yi Xian asked, what about the last one? This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Yun Sheng shook his head. The last one doesn't have a name. As he spoke he looked at Yi Xian. If these three divine armaments were to reappear, then the ranking of the Interstellar Bounty Board would change drastically. Yi Xian said in a low voice, none of the Yun family's ancestors could find them. Yun Sheng smiled bitterly. They couldn't? Yi Xian asked, why? Yun Sheng continued, the Yun clan's ancestral teachings state that the disciples of the Yun clan are not allowed to search for these three divine weapons. If the Yun clan were to search for these three divine weapons, even if it's just one, the Yun clan would be annihilated. Yi Xian said, did the Yun family's ancestors really not search for them? Yun Sheng said softly, of course not. The 17th generation of the Yun family did search for them. Unfortunately he never returned. Since then the Yun family never dared to search for these three divine armaments. As he spoke, he held the hilt of the divine spirit sword and recited a chant. Soon a black storage ring flew out from the hilt. He handed the storage ring and the divine armaments map to Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't accept it. Yun Sheng smiled. Scared? Yi Xian shook his head. You have to think this through. I'm not a member of the Yun family. Yun Sheng smiled. I didn't tell you about these two items because I was considering it. But now that the Yun family has treated me so well, why should I consider it? As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. I only have one request. If you have the ability in the future, remember to kill my big brother. Don't destroy the Yun family, just kill him. Yi Xian was silent. Yun Sheng said softly, can't I? Yi Xian said in a low voice, why do I feel like you're saying your last words? Yun Sheng chuckled. Fool, do you think I can still live? Do you know what the chains that locked me up were called? They are called soul-seizing chains. They will devour my soul crazily. When you arrived, my soul was almost gone. As he spoke, he placed the storage ring and the divine armaments map in front of Yi Xian. I've passed my life's inheritance to you. You'll have to slowly explore the rest of the path. Promise me don't give up on the path of forging? No, you definitely won't. Because when you get to the heaven domain, you'll find out how popular it is to be a blacksmith. There will be many benefits. As he spoke, his voice became softer and softer. Yi Xian's face changed. He quickly said, Senior, I'll take you to the Dao Yi Academy. Then, Yun Sheng shook his head. It's useless. Nothing can make up for the dissipation of a soul. Yi Xian's mind sank into his body. Second floor, great God. It's useless. The second floor, great God, interrupted Yi Xian. Unless she is here and forcibly gathers his dissipated soul. Yi Xian naturally knew who the second floor great God was referring to. It was the woman in the plain dress. At this time Yun Sheng suddenly said, after I die, bury me here. As he spoke he looked around. My life's wish is to forge a weapon that can be listed on the Interstellar Bounty list. Unfortunately, I won't have the chance. As his voice fell, he closed his eyes. Yi Xian kept silent where he was for a long time. In the end, he buried Yun Sheng in front of a tree and bowed deeply. I will definitely repay your kindness in teaching me. Master Yin, don't worry. In the future, Yi Xian will definitely seek justice for you. After saying that, he put away the storage ring and the divine armaments map. As he was about to leave, he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at the divine armaments map. The next moment he was stunned. The location of the third treasure was in one of the towers. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.